I'm bored. Is it safe to go outside? Nope. Well, I'm not going outside again anytime soon, so might as well play some games. Question is, which one? Yeah, that's a good enough excuse. Super Mario Bros., the #1 best-selling video game franchise ever made because Tetris wasn't good enough. It's difficult to believe just how big the Mario series really is. There are hundreds of games featuring the plumber, ranging from art programs to WarioWare, and that's just the alphabetic order. Kart racers, sports titles, party games, just about every single game genre has had the big man popped into them. However, there is one genre in particular that Mario has always been inseparably connected to, a genre that, for all intents and purposes, he might as well have invented. Picross. I've found my bliss. Yes, obviously the Mario series is best known for their unforgettable platformers. Depending on how you count, they have dozens of different games based around running and jumping. But hey, you don't have to count like that if you don't want to. For example, I only count video games with decapitated birds. So there are two. One of the most successful and highly acclaimed series ever made, the Super Mario series are a set of platformers almost all exclusive to Nintendo's own dedicated consoles. As mentioned, the exact number is a bit debatable. I mean, some people consider Super Mario Run a main series entry. You can't tell, but in the script, people had quotation marks. You see, my goal now is to play every single main series Mario game before Super Mario Wonder launches in October, and then to play that because frankly I don't want to bother with trick-or-treaters. So, what games am I going to be playing? Probably not this. For this latest project, I'm going to be limiting which games I'm actually playing. I feel like if I don't, things will get out of hand really quickly. First off, only the platformers in the main series. I'm not about to play through any of the RPGs. I want to get this done before next year. I'm also only playing the Mario games, so no Yoshi's Island, no Wario Land 1, and no Donkey Kong. Not even 94. Basically, if you can't play as Mario or he isn't in the title, I'm not interested. No remakes for this go around. Obviously, for a lot of the games I'm going to be playing ports and re-releases because I don't own every Nintendo console, but if they actually change the game's code, I'm not interested. And finally, only games originally released on Nintendo home console or handheld systems. So no arcade games, no mobile ports, and no weird PC titles. I'm interested in the games Nintendo wanted us to play. You know, like the Lost Levels. And that's all the rules. So what's next? Wait, I actually have to play the games? You know, this would probably be more convincing if my NES wasn't visible behind me. Super Mario Bros., the game that invented side-scrollers, platformers, and decent pack-in games. Apologies to all Tug Hunt fans. Not Driver Fight fans, though. Y'all are just objectively wrong. How much of an introduction do I actually have to give this game? It's the first real game in the biggest game series ever made. It's still in the top 10 best-selling video games of all time. It restarted an industry that has taken over the majority of our world, and Nintendo has gone out of their way to ensure that no man, woman, child, or non-determinate being can't play it. Hey, who are you calling non-determinate? Primarily designed by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka, Super Mario Bros. Is the sequel to Mario Bros., much in the same way a cake is the sequel to a pie. The games have very little in common, honestly, outside of turtles and two humans. I guess there are also pipes, but by that logic, Sonic the Hedgehog is a sequel to RoboCop because they both feature robots and death. Well, okay, that's not really fair. Also, can we maybe tone down the non-sequiturs? This isn't up is not jump. I hate how you can pretty much always tell from my script which YouTubers I've been watching most recently. So, what's the story here? Well, if you have the manual, you can learn more about the grand plot of this game. I don't. To be fair, there's really not much story in the game. Like, let's just head this off at the pass. Pretty much every 2D game in the series, you can sum up the plot in like 2 sentences. Here it's, an evil turtle kidnapped a princess, go save her. That's all you need. What the fuck is a field horsehair plant? This, apparently. Well, that explains everything. Alright, I'm done stalling. Let's actually play this game. Fun fact, I played the Super Mario Bros. And Duck Hunt combo pack on an original NES for this, as well as the Switch Online release. But hey, I could have played the SMB, Duck Hunt, and World Class Track Meet combo pack, which I do also have. I don't own a Zapper or a Power Pad. These are basically just 2 copies of Super Mario Bros. Why does this have my NES collection? Well, so let's get the presentation out of the way first. And yes, I know that criticizing an NES game's graphics is never a good look, but I was never pretty to begin with, and neither is this game. It's not terrible, it's distinct enough, and it does the job, but that's about all it does. I mean, compare this game to later NES games, and it's pretty clear that the console could give us better graphics. To be fair, the game was fairly early in the NES's lifespan, so it makes sense, and I don't think it's some big problem with the game, but it is still there, especially if you're playing on an original system. Because everyone still has an original NES. The music is kind of in a similar boat to me, honestly. I know, criticizing Koji Kondo's original Mario score is basically sacrilege, and the game's tunes are genuinely great, nice and catchy, but they are incredibly simple, and there are only like 5 tracks for the full game. Also, I know this is almost certainly a technical limitation, but a lot of the sound effects cut out part of the music, including the coins. I mean, who collects coins in a Mario game anyway? Okay, enough delays, let's play the actual damn game. And it's Super Mario Bros. Hold B to run, press A to jump, hold right to go right, and hold left to go a little bit left. Yes, the most unique feature of the original Mario now is that while you can scroll the screen to the right as you play, you can't scroll it to the left at all. It's definitely a bit of a limitation of the original engine, and it can be a bit hard to adjust to if you're coming over from more recent games, but I don't know, there's some interesting challenge to the fact you can't back up too much. I can't tell you how many times I've accidentally knocked a mushroom back past the point of no return. Other than that, getting hit always turns you into Small Mario even if you have a Fire Flower. There's no such thing as one-way platforms. Oh, if you collect a Fire Flower while you're still Small Mario, you just become Super Mario instead of Fire Mario. Look, the point is there aren't exactly a ton of unique features in this game compared to the sequels. It's the baseline for Mario games. Just move to the right and get to the end. Maybe take a few shortcuts or find a few secrets, and that's it. This is a very simple game in the grand scope of the series. Hell, I came into this playthrough expecting to say there's not much reason to play this game compared to later entries, and I mean, maybe in some ways that's true. However, there is one important thing that this game has that more recent games don't have. Quick, simple fun. It's almost hard to believe just how much fun I had with this game. Yes, it's very simple, but that almost helps with the game's gameplay loop. There's no saving, no loading, and the only way to start in the later world is to either get a game over and use a quick cheat code, or to beat the game and then never turn it off, though even then that's more for the unlockable hard mode. However, you don't lose all too much if you have to turn the game off. Introducing the Warp Rooms, quick secrets at the end of 1-2 and 4-2 that let you skip ahead to later worlds. I've seen some people argue that these are somehow harmful to the game, like it's incentivizing people to play the game less. I've also seen a federal criminal show me his panic room. Yeah, these are actually kind of a genius feature, at least for a game without a save feature. It lets the player quickly get back up to whatever level they were last on, whether they had to turn the game off or they just got a game over. It might be the first ever quality of life feature, honestly, at least in a Nintendo game. It definitely helps that the first one in 1-2 is fairly easy to find, at least once you realize you can walk in front of the score. Man, that must have been magical for the first people who played this game. Honestly, it's not all that shabby nowadays. There are also some small things that are actually kind of impressive for the time, like the balance lifts in 3-3, 4-3, and 6-3. I realize that it probably isn't actually all that advanced, but it definitely feels a bit more advanced than you would expect for the time. Similar story with the springs, or jumping boards as they're called here. Though they are a bit more finicky than I prefer, they still offer up a bit of a different challenge. Okay, what else? Do you want to talk about the Toad fake-outs? Yeah, I'm gonna be honest, there's not a lot for me to talk about. This is a very simple game at the end of the day, but it's still definitely fun. Still, it's pretty short. If you're good at it, you can beat it within like an hour. Less if you're using the warp rooms. So, what's next? Mario 2, huh? Which one? Oh, hey, don't mind me, I'm just writing a Percy Jackson sequel. I'm pretty sure all I need to do is change a few words in the original and it'll make a whole new book. What Sea of Monsters?
So, you've just beaten Super Mario Bros. Want to play a sequel? Well, joke's on you, we aren't in Japan. Yes, rather infamously, the direct sequel to the original Super Mario wasn't localized outside of Japan, being exclusive to the region outside of a remake in Super Mario All-Stars for years. Apparently, Howard Phillips, one of Nintendo's consultants, felt the game was a bit too unfairly difficult and unfun, so it probably wouldn't do too well in the market that was still recovering from a major video game crash. However, in 2007, the original game was made available on the Wii's Virtual Console, and ever since it's been a fairly reliable release on whatever Nintendo's current retro release platform is. So, no physical copy this time for me, but I can play it on Switch Online, so let's play The Lost Levels.
This game better have a good title screen at the very least. Okay, it's better than Mario 1.
Well, we have two options from the start. We can play as Mario or Luigi. That's an interesting idea, and Luigi does play a little differently from Mario. He can jump higher and move a little faster, but he's a lot more slippery, so stopping or reversing momentum is much more difficult. It's a nice trade-off, though I feel like it's not exactly built into the game design all that well. You have to design a level very well for it to be fair to play for two different characters that are this different. Obviously, it doesn't have to be the exact same difficulty for both of them, but there has to be a lot of thought put in to make levels decently playable as both characters.
I don't like this game.
First off, the presentation is exactly the same. Yes, a lot of the individual sprites for tiles are different, the clouds and hills now have eyes, and the blocks are more complicated looking, but it doesn't look better, it just looks more complicated. I feel bad for criticizing the first game's graphics now, because as simple as they were, they all fit together so damn well. Here, it feels like the enemies and ground tiles are from two separate games, because they basically are. Oh, and there's no new music, no new sound effects, it's very much just Mario 1, but with some small tweaks that mostly just make it worse.
And if you're wondering if I'm talking about the presentation or the whole game, the answer is yes.
So, here's the thing. The Lost Levels aren't very fun. The gameplay is the exact same as Mario 1, but the level design is just not as good. The jumps aren't challenging, they're just unfair. The enemies aren't smartly placed as much as they are just kind of spammed, and the whole thing is just filled with design choices made specifically to make the player frustrated, like jumping on a spring and going miles into the air where you can barely tell where you are.
For those who've actually watched my Zelda videos, y'all will know what I mean when I say this game reminded me a lot of Four Swords Adventures. You know, the worst Zelda game Nintendo ever made.
There are some interesting new features though, like the poison mushroom. Look, I understand the idea behind this thing, but I'd rather not be punished for hitting the question mark blocks that I'm supposed to hit to play the game. There are also now 5 secret worlds on top of the 8 main ones. For one of these, World 9, you have to beat the game without using any of the warp zones. You know how I praised the warp zones in Mario 1 as one of the smartest additions to the game? How it lets you play all of the game without having to power through all 32 levels all in one go? Well, apparently, that was a mistake, because the only way to get to some of the only actual original levels in the game is to do just that. However, the other 4 worlds are accessed by beating the game 8 times, and at the least you can use warp zones for that one. Still a stupid requirement. At least for the hard mode in Mario 1, you only have to beat the game once. Wait.
What is the point of this game if the original game already had a hard mode? If this is supposed to just be a harder challenge for people who beat the original game, isn't that the literal point of hard mode? What, was it not hard enough because there were only 2 maze levels instead of 5? Because Lord knows, an infinitely looping level until you choose the exact right path is the height of game design!
Okay, let's calm down. I think I understand why they thought this was the best way to make the sequel. It all goes back to the arcades and Atari games. For those of you who've played Space Invaders before, have you ever seen Space Invaders Part 2? Even if you haven't, you have. Pac-Man Plus, Super Pong, these do change things and add things, but they aren't some huge leap as the sequel. They're just the original game, but tweaked. Plus, I mean, the game was originally titled Super Mario Bros. 2, and the box was labeled for super players. This isn't like Pikmin 4, where they start the game off with an hour-long tutorial in case players haven't played any of the previous games. The developers figured anyone who would be playing this game would have already beat the original game, possibly multiple times. Hell, millions of copies were sold, and the game was a pack-in for so many NES and Famicom consoles. So the game not being some huge advancement in the series, plus being so much more difficult and unfair, it does make some sense. Still not very fun.
I just don't get this game, honestly. I sort of understand why it's like this, but it's just not fun. I know people in the comments are gonna be like, oh, you're just bad at the game, and that's why you don't like it. Like, yeah, I'm not good at games. I have poor reflexes, bad hand-eye coordination, and I'm impatient. I died a lot in the first Super Mario Bros., but there I could understand why I died, and it felt like my fault. Here I just feel like the game is designed to not be beaten. It's dumb. Plus, like, I'm playing the Switch Online version, so even when I do die, I can just rewind and try again. But at least when I do that with the first game, I still have fun. Here, it just makes it a little bit less annoying. But hey, this is just my opinion, you know? I've never been one for rage games or intentionally hard as nails series. If you think you'll enjoy this game, go ahead and give it a shot. You know, not if you aren't Japanese. I'm glad there is a way for us to play, even if I don't like the game. Still, I'd probably recommend the All-Star version over the original. There, you don't have to beat the game 8 times to access the last 4 bonus worlds. If you'd enjoy this game, have fun. But I think this kind of sequel works better for games than for books. You know, I've had a decent number of identity crises over the course of my life. Gender, sexuality, mental health, and intelligence. Quick quiz, do you think I'm building to a Birdo joke or a Doki Doki Panic joke? Because even I'm not entirely sure at this point.
What a clever idea for a Mario sequel. Identity fraud. I think just about everyone knows the story at this point. The original Japanese Mario 2 was considered too difficult for the American market, so Nintendo of America grabbed a completely unrelated game and slapped the Mario title on it. Just like how I'm a dude with tits slapped on. In reality, the game was originally created as a prototype for vertical scrolling and 2-player co-op, and even when it was retooled to tie into a Japanese festival, it still had a ton of Mario elements, including the stars from Mario 1 and the power block from the arcade Mario Bros. Apparently even the coin and jump sound effects from Mario were reused. So basically, it was already a new take on a Mario game, but with a family of festival mascots. I'd offer some more information about the Yumi Kocho Festival the original branding was based on, or the original tie-in game, but I can't speak Japanese, so I'll leave that task to someone more professional.
So yeah, I think the story behind this is a little more complicated than just they made a different game into a Mario game. It was pretty much always a Mario game, just a very different take on it. Even in Japan, the game eventually came over as Super Mario USA. Hell, the GBA remake came out in Japan before it did in America, and pretty much every element from the game has become a mainstay in the Mario series. Except the villain, he's a part of the Zelda series.
Well, we know the real-life story now. What's the game's story? Apparently, one night Mario had a dream about a door with voice calling to him, and when he woke up, he found that same door in a nearby cave. Press start to play. Not that it matters much, since the end of the game reveals this was all just a weird dream Mario was having from the start. Man, what a ripoff! I thought this was a work of fiction, not a work of fiction. To be fair, I think the official explanation is that the world of the game, Subcon, is a dream world, so even if it is a dream, it might still be real. Besides, why are you playing an NES platformer for the plot? Especially a Mario game, the fact the plot isn't just Bowser did an evil thing, go stop him, is probably the main sign we aren't in Kansas anymore.
It does make the Shy Guys migration a bit weirder, especially since it happened in a prequel.
The first thing we see upon starting up is a character select, a pretty innovative idea for the game. This is one of those things that is a holdover from the original release version. 4 playable characters, each with slight differences in how they play. Mario feels pretty standard, Luigi is a little floaty and jumps higher, Toad lifts things faster than the other characters, and Peach knee Toadstool can float for a couple seconds in the air when she jumps. It's pretty interesting. Feels sort of like a more fleshed out version of the differences between Mario and Luigi from the Lost levels. Personally, I always stick to Mario since he feels like he's generally the character the game was built around, plus I'm a basic bitch. Well, once we pick our sacrifice, we dive in, quite literally.
Oh, I've had this nightmare too!
Yes, just like that original prototype, this game's biggest innovation is arguably the vertical scrolling, though it isn't as smooth as in later games. Generally, the level either sticks to one screen that jerks up or down with your player character, kind of like Zelda 1, or smooth horizontal scrolling that sat in a specific vertical plane, like Super Mario Bros. 1. You can't really move in all four directions as smoothly as you'd want, but hey, we can move back to the left, plus if we were scrolling vertically, we can loop around through the left and right edges of the screen, akin to the arcade Mario Bros. The game really does feel like a progression of the previous Mario games, while also doing its own weird things, and that extends into the basic gameplay. Ever walk on an enemy's back?
Once in junior high, I got suspended for it.
Probably the most unique feature of Mario 2 is that jumping on enemies doesn't hurt them. Instead, to damage enemies, you can either pick them up or throw something at them. Yes, the game is based around pulling things up, either out of the ground or just up off the floor. It works fairly well. Since you can lift up most enemies themselves, you're not at risk of running out of ammo. Also, while most grass you can pull up gives you a vegetable like a turnip, some will give you a bomb or a turtle shell that works like a standard Koopa shell in other Mario games. Some will even give you a potion that can open a magic door, taking you to subspace. This is kind of a cool idea. Plucking grass here gives you coins to earn extra lives, and some areas of subspace have mushrooms which give you an extra hit point. But in general, it's kind of superfluous.
So are most video games.
One thing this game does have in common with the first Super Mario is that it's a lot of fun. I seriously love this game. Sure, there were a few moments of frustration, but usually I just needed to figure out what the game wanted me to do. In general, the game is so well designed, especially compared to the Japanese Mario 2. Each level is incredibly well built, pushing you to keep going forward and play through the whole thing. Admittedly, the game doesn't have a ton of levels. There are only 20 in all, with the first 6 worlds having 3 levels and the final and 7th having 2. But hey, each level is longer than previous Mario levels, and we don't have a timer pushing us to rush through, which is cool. And hey, you only have to play through once to fully beat the game, unlike lost levels. Or Doki Doki Panic for that matter.
Because the festival deserved it.
Plus, this game has so much of its own quirky charm. The bird on a flying carpet ducking down into jars like they were pipes, the final boss is Giant King Frog. It's all weird, but that kind of adds to its charm.
I really enjoyed this game. I honestly think it's more the real sequel to Super Mario Bros. Than the Lost Levels ever were. Lost Levels feels like that title fits more like it's cut levels from Mario 1 rather than being its own game. Super Mario Bros. 2 is its own game though, and it's so much fun to play through. Even nowadays, it's a very unique game in the series. It took until 3D World until different playing characters were reintroduced in an original game, and the game's emphasis on vertical design is very rare in the series as a whole. Hell, it's still the only game where you can ride on every enemy in the game, outside of the power-up in Mario Maker 2. I honestly enjoyed it more than I did the original Super Mario Bros., though I think it's a little less replayable than that game. There are some warps in subspace, but they're a lot harder to find than the warp zones in Mario 1, and I think it's a bit more fun to play the whole game in one go. Still, I love playing the game, and I'm more than willing to give it another go around. Once I'm done with the other dozen Mario games. You ever have an opinion about a video game that you just know will get you hated? Like the kind of opinion that will inspire people to tell you to kill yourself despite it really not mattering all that much? Yeah. Anyway, Ocarina of Time is still mid. Now, let's play Mario 3.
So, what kind of game could possibly follow the different versions of Super Mario Bros. 2?
Can I see the number line?
Yes, following the completion of the Lost Levels in Japan, Nintendo began working on a brand new, much more varied sequel to the games, with an emphasis on originality and engaging ideas. There were some ideas scrapped along the way, such as the game being isometric or a centaur power-up, but as things turned out, the only art of Centaur Mario is surprisingly tame but still unofficial. Ultimately, the game came out in late 1988 in Japan and early 1990 in North America. Europe, meanwhile, had to wait until mid-1991.
Does anyone miss the times when video games would have drastically different release dates depending on region? Anyone? Suppose there's nothing left to do but play the game. Now, I could play on my NES like I did with Mario 1, but frankly, I don't want to turn my couch around again.
So, we don't get any story from the start of the game, even by waiting on the title screen, though doing so gives us a nice little show between Mario and Luigi. Checking the manual does confirm that Bowser is behind everything, alongside his children, the Koopalings. Yes, his children. I don't care what retcons Miyamoto gives us nowadays, both the American and the Japanese manuals clarify that they are his children. Basically, the Koopalings stole wands from a bunch of kings across the world, and Mario must travel to castles, raid the Koopa airships, and save the transformed kings. Interestingly, this is the first game in the series to have continuous plot points between the Toad's assistants, the restored kings, and letters from the princess. Hell, we only learned she's been kidnapped after beating the 7th world.
Though, of course she gets kidnapped. It's a Mario game after all. Interestingly, her sprite seems to be based off her appearance in Super Mario Bros. 2. That is, our Mario Bros. 2, not Japan's. Confirming for me that even Nintendo of Japan knew Mario 2 in the USA was better than the Lost levels.
The graphics in general are more than decent. Definitely a big case of outlines on everything syndrome, but hey, that just makes everything fit together much better than in the Lost levels. Some oddities, to be fair. The 3rd king you saved is a recolored Mario. For some reason, the Buzzy Beetles used almost the exact same sprite as the first game, no outline at all. But in general, the graphics, they're alright. Same with the music. It's not my favorite soundtrack in the series, but it's still very catchy. It still has the same issues the other games have, where sound effects will cancel out part of the music. I guess that's just the limit of the NES, but it's not a huge deal. So, all that's left to talk about is the actual game.
Yeah, I don't love this game.
Don't get me wrong, this is an amazing game, objectively. The world map is genuinely genius, mixing more freeform exploration with the linear levels that were the Mario format. We have a ton of Mario staples introduced in this game: slopes, a more modern-looking Bowser, boss fights with very slight differences between them. We even have multiple kinds of power-ups for the first time. In Mario 1 and Lost levels, we just had Mushroom and then Fire Flower, and in Mario 2 we didn't even have power-ups outside of more health and brief invincibility. Here we have Fire Flowers, as usual, as well as the brand new Raccoon Leaf and Secret Tanuki suit, which let Mario go flying once he builds up enough speed. The Tanuki suit also lets him transform into an invincible statue when pressing down and B. Flying is actually pretty cool, and it works decently well, though it can sometimes be tricky to tell how long you have to run to gain full P speed. We also have 2 other power-ups introduced, the Frog suit and the Hammer suit. I did not use them once.
No, seriously, I beat every level in the game without using the Frog suit even once. And I never even found the Hammer suit. As far as I can tell, the suits are only found in extremely secret blocks hidden in specific levels or in specific item houses. Frankly, I'm more amazed I actually found the Tanuki suit. Not that it really mattered that much, honestly. I only really used the flying ability, not the invincibility.
Yeah, for reasons that don't make a ton of sense to me, only the Fire Flower and Raccoon Leaf are available in most question mark blocks, but there are 3 additional power-ups that are incredibly hard to get in a game where you can't replay levels or save. I mean, it's whatever, the Raccoon Leaf is a lot of fun and that's the one that's most available, so who cares? But it does kind of put in perspective how much of the game's ideas are just kind of nothing. Like the Warp Whistle, a very hidden item that appears in 3 locations in the full game, which takes you to the Warp Zone for this game. Obviously this is a good inclusion, the game still doesn't have a save feature, so having a way to quickly get up to later worlds is important. The thing is, you need to complete at least 3 levels to even get 1, and if you need to get to World 8, or even get to 5 through 7 without beating the first world, you need to beat 4. And find the secrets to actually get the whistles, which, okay, sure, the warp zones in Mario 1 were pretty well hidden, especially for the time, but they weren't hard to get once you knew what to do. Or how about the other overworld items, like the music box, that lets you skip the roaming enemies and really aren't hard to find, so they either make those enemies pointless, or if you actually want to play the game, it's pointless itself. Oh, and if you die in the last level of a world, the airship, it will fly somewhere else on the world map, which isn't hard to get to if you've, actually gotten to the end of the world, so it's just kind of annoying for no good reason.
Probably sounds like I hate this game, doesn't it? Here's the thing. Like I said, this game is good. Just objectively, it's a good game. The core gameplay loop is fun, there are things to work for in the levels. It's a good game. But I don't know why. This game just didn't really click for me. I kept drifting away from the game in my downtime, and by the end, a lot of levels just left me irritated. I don't think it's the game's fault, necessarily. I can absolutely understand why so many people think this is one of, if not the best game in the series. But, yeah, the game just didn't feel as fun as Mario 2, or at times even Mario 1. I think it's a better game than Super Mario Bros., but I think it's not controversial to say that game is a lot more replayable than Mario 3, if only in terms of being easier to replay. But you know what? I still think it's worth giving this game a shot, even if you think you won't love it. I mean, hey, better than Ocarina of Time. Did you know that the 3DS is surprisingly easy to hack? So, disclaimer, you might have noticed in other videos I've been looking off to the side, presumably at a TV where the game is. Yeah, that's where my script is. can't remember my writing to save my life, so even when I'm talking about games I played on the 3DS, can we just, pretend that there's a TV there with the gameplay somehow? Okay, great. Can you tell I don't have much to say about the game already?
Oh boy, I can't wait to play Super Mario Land! Wait, what do you mean I already beat it? Yes, Super Mario Land is the shortest game in the entire series, with a grand total of 12 levels in 4 worlds. You can beat the whole game in less time than it will take to watch all of my Mario reviews. I understand that's not a mistake. It's an original Game Boy game. It was built to be bite-sized, complete with no save feature. But when even the first game in the series is more than double the size, and it feels better to play, it leaves this game with basically no real purpose.
Wait, don't I usually start with some context before I get into the complaints?
Released in 1989, right between the Japanese and North American releases of Mario Bros. 3, Super Mario Land is the first Super Mario game made for a portable system, and a launch title for the original Game Boy in just about every region. It was the first game in the series made without Shigeru Miyamoto's direct involvement, though at the producer's helm was Gunpei Yokoi, the creator of the Game Boy itself, as well as the Game & Watch, Rob, games like Metroid and Kid Icarus, and even the original Donkey Kong and arcade Mario Bros. To some extent. One of Yokoi's frequent collaborators, Satoru Okada, served as director, while also helping to create the Game Boy. Interestingly, this was the first and last Mario game Okada worked on.
Oh, I wonder why.
So obviously the game is extremely simple graphically, even more so than Mario 1, though here frankly I think it's a lot more justified. This isn't like with the NES, where the system could definitely produce higher quality graphics, they just didn't know how to use it to its best ability. This was the original Game Boy, a system that could barely play puzzle games. The other launch titles were Tennis and Mahjong for fuck's sake. The much smaller sprites do wonders at preventing any kind of screen crunch, and the game runs pretty damn smoothly, maybe even smoother than some of the NES games. Similar story for the music and sound here too. It's not the most complex, and Koji Kondo's score is missed to a certain extent, but it's still a very catchy soundtrack, and hey, at least this is the first game in the series where sound effects don't mess up the music. Overall, the presentation is pretty great for the system. As for the gameplay,
yeah, I don't love this game.
This game is very funky to play. The physics just feel off. It commits what I consider a cardinal sin of platformers. If you fall off a platform, you'll plummet downwards faster than if you had jumped off and got to that level again. This can make otherwise easily passable gaps so much harder than they need to be. The controls also feel really funky, even for an early Game Boy game. It's hard to explain, but it feels a bit too slippery when the level design is built to be more precise. In general, the level design ranges from lackluster to incredibly frustrating.
It doesn't help how little content there is when some of these levels are bad. Like, if you only have 12 levels and 3 of them suck, that's about a quarter of the game that you hate playing.
As for some of the more intentional differences from other entries, I don't mind that much. It feels like a bizarro version of Super Mario 1, complete with not being able to scroll left, but the super different enemies and level themes make it so much more creative than Lost levels. Hell, even the bosses are all fairly unique to fight, even compared to Mario 3. Granted, the fact that 2 of the boss levels are in vehicles that control completely differently from the entire rest of the game definitely contributes to that, but hey, it's still an upside, and this game desperately needs one.
Overall, though, the game just isn't all that good. I can understand if some people really like it, and I do appreciate some of its more original ideas, like the Super Ball, which you can only have one of on screen at a time, so even the cool ideas feel nerfed. Daisy is an interesting character these days, but in this game she's basically just Princess Toadstool, but with an actual name. But yeah, overall, while I didn't hate playing most of the game, I just didn't love it. Otherwise, I don't really have much to say. No, seriously, that's literally it. Go to the next video. Anyone remember how in 2017 Nintendo released the SNES Classic? Pretty solid little device, 21 different games and a very good emulator system. Not much purpose to buying one today since that emulator is now available for any Nintendo Online users, but hey, the Classic has more third-party titles, so that's positive. But there's no Spanky's Quest, so is it even worth existing?
So, how do we make a bigger game than Super Mario Land? I suppose we could move up to a country or a continent, but you know what, let's just go forward with a full world. Super Mario World released as a launch title and pack-in for the Super NES in 1999. over in Japan, 1991 in North America, and 1992 in Europe and Australia. It being a pack-in probably contributes to it being the best-selling game for the system, selling almost twice as much as the second bestseller, and that commercial success has translated to critical acclaim, with review scores in the 9s and 10s, and fans regarding it as one of the best Mario games ever made. Now, given Mario 3 was arguably even more acclaimed, and some still arguing that game was the better of the two, and I thought it was just okay, what does that say about my opinion on this game?
Holy shit, I love this game!
So, for the first time in the series, we actually get a bit of story right after starting the game. Yes, if Mario Bros. 3 was the first to introduce continuous plot points throughout, then Super Mario World is the first to use it smoothly. We get a brief text box to set up the plot, another after freeing Yoshi for the first time, and then a short spiel after beating each boss. It's still not a complex plot, of course. The basic summary is Bowser kidnapped a princess and trapped a bunch of friendly dinosaurs. Go stop him. But hey, there's a decent amount of charm to the story, especially with the final boss. My lord, they really went out of their way to make this fight as atmospheric as possible. No HUD outside of any reserve items, completely black background, dark and intimidating music, the princess screaming for help. It all adds up to the first Bowser fight to feel properly climactic.
Though to be fair, part of that is down to Bowser's sprites in this game. My lord. The man looks like he came to Dinosaur Island so he could inject himself with T-Rex DNA.
Well, that unfortunate design aside, the game looks phenomenal. They really took advantage of the Super Nintendo's graphical capabilities. This is one of the most colorful Mario games I think I've ever seen. Obviously, it's not the most advanced Mario game ever made, since with one exception, every game after this used full 3D models. But honestly, I think a lot of those don't look as good as Super Mario World. Like, compare this with New Super Mario Bros., which almost definitely used more powerful graphics tech, but frankly, I'd rather see more graphics like this game. I guess that's probably why so many indie games use the 16-bit style.
I can't make the exact same comparison with the music. Like, I don't think that later music is necessarily worse, but I still think what this game does with its music is great. I especially love the drums added to the sound when you're riding on Yoshi. I don't know, it's just a small bit of dynamic sound, but I like it. I don't know, it's Koji Kondo. Obviously, it's a bop. Can I just say, like, I never know what to say about these games' music. Like, it's the one aspect of them that I'm even mildly qualified to talk about. But God, I just have nothing to say. It doesn't help that my attention span is so shitty most of the time. I can't just be playing a video game. I'm watching a video and listening to other music, so usually I'm not actually listening to the game's music in real time. Like, I played so much Zelda, and all I can really say is that, oh, it's cool how the title theme from Link to the Past plays when Tetra gets her Triforce piece. Oh, have you noticed how the stable theme in Breath of the Wild is a counter melody to a Kota song? And like, anyone who didn't already know that has no clue what I'm even talking about? I don't know, I just feel like I have to have some comment to make about the music for all these games, but like, I really don't, man. It's just music and it sounds good most of the time, and that's all I've got!
Dude, just calm down.
No, you calm down!
Now then, let's talk about the gameplay. It's Mario, but now with spinning. Obviously, with a lot of games in the series, there's not much point in rehashing any points about the core gameplay loop. If you've played one 2D Mario game, you've played them all. There are a few unique things this game adds though. For example, since we now have 2 more face buttons, we get a brand new ability we can use. The spin jump, which acts as a more effective jump for enemies and lets you destroy some blocks from above. Yes, for some reason in this game, just jumping on most enemies doesn't kill them. The Goombas here just sort of pop onto their heads. Oh wait, sorry, they're called Galoombas nowadays. My bad. You also can't technically break blocks from below. Instead, they just start spinning for a while before going back to normal. You can only break them with a spin jump from above, which works fine. It means you can go through them at any level of Mario at least, but it is kind of odd. Also, like Mario 1, no matter what power-ups you have, if you get hit, you go back down as Small Mario. That's kind of dumb. You can now have power-ups in reserve at least, though new power-ups always override whatever you have in reserve, even simple mushrooms. And when you get hurt, the reserve item automatically gets used, even if you're intentionally getting hurt to get through a smaller hole. I mean, it's not unmanageable, it works fine enough, it's just kinda dumb.
Wait, didn't I say I like this game?
So none of the brand new power-ups from Mario 3 return. Instead, we have a set of even newer power-ups. I mean, it's not a huge loss. I'd have liked to see better uses for the frog suit and the hammer suit, same for the Tanuki suit, but I mean, we have a pretty smooth replacement for the raccoon leaf and the cape feather. Same deal as that one, hit the button once to do a spin attack, hold it to get a run going, and start flying. However, now, instead of just going up as far as possible and just running out of juice, once you reach height, you can start manipulating your flight to bounce up and down. If you're good enough at the rhythm, you can even get effectively infinite height, since you can actually bump yourself higher with the bounces. It's a really cool power-up, maybe one of my favorite in the Flying Mario abilities. We also have two more unique power-ups in the form of the P-Balloon and Yoshi, a rideable mount who makes his debut in this game. Interestingly, both of these effectively act independently of the standard power-up structure in the game. If you have a Fire Flower or a Cape Feather going into the P-Balloon, you'll still have it once that runs out. Same with Yoshi, though since he's less of a direct power-up and more of a rideable mount, that makes sense. The P-Balloon is fine, I definitely prefer its Mario Maker 2 incarnation to how it works here, but it does what it was designed to do well enough, just not the most exciting thing in the world.
Like any power-up ever is.
Yoshi, meanwhile, is maybe one of the coolest ideas they could have added. He can eat stuff, he has extra powerful stomps, if he eats certain shells he can spit fire or fly or make the ground shake, and if you get hit he runs away but you can get him back. It's so fun, Yoshi's the best, I love this little dino. Now, Yoshi can go between levels in this game, which is cool, though he can't enter the ghost houses or the fortresses, which is kind of lame, but he does wait outside, so you get back on him once you beat those. The P-Balloon is more limited, you only have it for like 20 seconds, but you can freely float during that time. It's definitely built to be used in specific cases to let you access secrets or in one of the bonus levels float over big gaps without a run-up. These are both pretty cool, and they contribute to one of Super Mario World's biggest strengths, the absolutely genius level design.
Yes, while Mario Bros. 3 introduced less linear levels to the series, Mario World introduced levels with actual reasons to be non-linear. The whole game is built as one large, interconnected map. There are still distinct worlds and screens and levels, but it's not too hard to stitch them together into one large thing. There are about 73 levels in the game, and a slot of 24 have additional secret exits, which can be accessed with specific steps, which adds up to a lot of reflex if you're going for 100% completion. Luckily, the game signals most levels with multiple exits by making the level right on the map, though ghost houses just assume they have multiple exits, because they all do.
I think pretty much all of these levels are a ton of fun. The first world, Yoshi's Island, is a very simple area to get you accustomed to how the game plays, but it's a good example of how much fun they pack into these levels. There's so many new ideas, like the ramp blocks that let you run on the wall, or the snake platforms, or the tutorial blocks that tell you how certain mechanics work. The enemies are so unique for the time. There's Wriggler, Magic Koopa, and Charging Chuck who went on to be mainstays eventually, plus the dinosaurs Rex and Dino Rhino, the return of Pokey and Ninja from Mario 2, even freaking Super Cape wearing Koopas. The Koopaling boss fights, while still reusing some ideas, have a ton more variety among them, from sumo-like lava battles or dummy pipe distractions. You can throw enemies straight up and activate blocks too high for you to jump to. You can find switch palaces that let you turn on previously empty blocks. You can change paths to pulley lifts, and it's all so damn good!
Holy shit, I love this game. This is easily my favorite of the classic 5 Mario games, and I can see why Nintendo didn't make many new 2D Marios after this. Like, seriously, after this, it's Mario Land 2 for Game Boy, and then we don't have a new 2D Mario until 2006. And I can see why. This game is absolutely amazing. It's fun, engaging, and you can play it for hours upon hours. I love this game so much. But it isn't Spanky's Quest. Fucking worthless. Do you think Mario and Wario have ever explored each other's bodies?
So, how do you follow up the majesty that was Super Mario World?
It's called Reduction Mamoplasty.
Released in 1992, Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, is the direct sequel to Super Mario Land, if you couldn't tell just by the title. While Satoru Okada didn't return for this game, Gunpei Yokoi did once again serve as producer, with 2 new directors whose names I'm a little afraid to try and pronounce. Apparently the team who worked on this game in the research and development department were a bit bitter about working on a game for a series made by the entertainment analysis and development department, so they decided to make the main villain a darker, evil version of Mario, with his name basically being a pun on Bad Mario.
And then they started a platformer series starring the Bad Mario. Life is weird that way.
So, our story here is pretty simple. Wario has stolen Mario's castle. Go kill him, I guess. Yes, apparently Wario hypnotized the inhabitants of Mario's private island, Mario Land, in order to take over the castle and force them to obey him. And the only way to stop this is gather 6 special coins held by 6 different bosses. Why? Because video games require incredibly complicated locking mechanisms, I don't know. The only other really notable thing about the plot is that apparently Wario took over during the events of the first Mario Land, and the final boss from that game is now one of the bosses here. So, were they in league the whole time? I mean, maybe. In the Mario Land manual, Tatanga also apparently hypnotized people. Not that either of these plots really needed the whole hypnotism angle, they really aren't that complex.
So we're just gonna ignore that apparently Mario owns his own castle and island, and he has this whole time? Is Mario royalty? Is that why he keeps helping princesses and kings because he wants to keep up a diplomatic relationship? Whatever, the plot's not really important for the game. If you want, you could just imagine Mario raiding a random island that's been using his image illegally. It'd be in character, at least.
Well, we hop in the game and, hey, first portable entry with a save system. That's always nice, and it makes sense since this game takes a number of cues from Mario World. Like, look at this Mario sprite and tell me it's not mainly based on the SNES game. The graphics in general are pretty solid, especially for the system, though there are occasionally issues with just how big everything is. Mario Land 1, yeah, you could fit hundreds of these sprites on the screen, no problem. Here, while screen crunch isn't as big an issue as it could have been, it's still definitely a concern. Luckily though, we do use the Mario 3 style of power tiers, where getting hit as Fire Mario just changes you to Super Mario.
Although, being Fire Mario has its own oddities. Look, I know they had to do something to make it clear what power-ups you had while in black and white, but I feel like the feather on the forehead is just kind of troublesome. But hey, who am I to comment? I mean, I'm not even sure who it's offensive towards. That's a lie, but it's easier than the truth.
Well, speaking of Fire Mario, the power-up from the first Mario Land, the Super Ball, has been cut, with the more traditional Fire Flower making its transition to the portable line. In addition, there's one new power-up along the lines of the Raccoon Leaf and the Cape Feather in the Carrot. That's its official name, it's just a carrot. It transforms Mario into Bunny Mario, which isn't amazing. Like the aforementioned power-ups, it lets Mario hover in the air, but that's all it does. No flying, no spinning attack, you can't even do the added spin jump while in bunny form. It just slows your descent if you hold the jump button, and slows it even more if you repeatedly tap the jump button. It's not terrible, I guess, but it's a serious step down from other power-ups. It's useful for platforming sometimes, but most of the time, I just prefer to be Fire Mario, racism or not.
I mean, obviously I'd prefer not.
So, after we complete our first level, the Mushroom Zone, the world opens up. This is actually a fairly unique structure, at least for a 2D Mario. Rather than having a linear order of worlds, some of which you can skip if you use secrets, once you finish the tutorial level, you can start with any of the 6 main worlds. You have to beat the boss in all 6 if you want to beat the final boss, of course, but otherwise, you have a lot more freedom than you would expect. This is definitely a great idea for a portable Mario game. Even without the save feature, this means it's super easy to replay your favorite level whenever you want. With the save feature, it's so easy that anyone who loves the game has no reason to not keep it with them at all times.
Well, maybe not all times. Don't bring it to, like, work. You might get distracted.
The world themes are also pretty cool. We have a giant world where you're the size of a bug exploring around a house, a journey into space after hopping a ride in a Hippo's bubble, a Halloween-themed Horrorland where the Goombas wear Jason masks, and we even have a level inside of Robot Mario's crotch. Yeah, I know it's supposed to be his stomach, but stomach bubbles aren't a real thing, and they knew what they were doing filling the level head to toe with balls.
Did they, though?
The levels are pretty decent too. Not my favorite in the series, I don't think they stack up to the best of Super Mario World, but they're still a very solid set of stages. It helps that, unlike pretty much any other Mario game, every single level takes place on a single map, with even the pipes just leading to a different area without a full transition. The only exceptions are the boss fights, which each have their own dedicated arenas. The bosses themselves, they're fine. Outside of Tatanga, they're all original to this game, and some of them are interesting, if occasionally mismatched. Like, why are the 3 little pigs the boss of the giant Mario mech? But hey, they aren't too hard and most aren't too easy, it's all fine. Thinking of it, the same could be said of most of the levels. There are a couple pretty challenging levels, like the Star Stage, and finding the secret exits is so difficult I only found one in the whole game. However, for the most part, the game is pretty easy. Not a complaint, of course, it is a kid's game for Game Boy, just something that might turn off some players.
Not that any game is terribly difficult when you're playing on an official Nintendo emulator. The game is more than fun, to be sure, and I think it's definitely worth a playthrough for any Mario fan. But it's hard to say it's one of the best in the series. I enjoyed playing it more than Mario 3, but it's definitely a lot less substantial. And it's worth remembering, I am terrible at video games. Overall, though, it gives a lot of hope for future 2D Mario games. Shame this was basically the last one. You know, every time I look at this controller, I only have one question. Why do I have this but not an actual N64?
So, how do we evolve from games like Super Mario World and Mario Land 2? Well, we could focus on new characters like Yoshi and Wario, but what about the main Mario series? Well, we do have this fancy new console we're working on at Nintendo, and we can make really cool 3D graphics with it, a lot more realistic graphics than with the FX chip on SNES. Plus, its controller, while odd, is still much more advanced than any other controller we've made. We have 6 buttons on the front, 3 full shoulder buttons, and a brand new analog stick, as well as our classic D-pad. So let's give old Ann Miyamoto one last roll in the director's chair and make the first fully 3D Mario platformer a launch title for the N64. And why not, let's give this kid who worked on Link's Awakening and Yoshi's Island the assistant director role. I mean, his given name is Yoshiaki, he was born to work on Mario. Thus was born Super Mario 64, and thus was killed 2D gaming for like a decade.
Do you think this is what the Sphinx was actually talking about?
So, for our story here, we have a fairly simple setup. Peach, which is now her name in America, invites Mario over to her castle for some cake, but it turns out she's actually been kidnapped by Bowser.
Because it's the Sunday, I guess?
More accurately, the castle itself has been taken over by Bowser, with all of its inhabitants now trapped inside its walls. Now it's up to Mario to save the day and kick Bowser's behind. Again, standard weekend for Mario. There are some interesting twists, like a noticeable lack of green. Yes, Luigi is nowhere to be found. He was originally planned to be included as a co-op partner, but those plans fell through, despite what conspiracy theorists will tell you.
It says Eternal Star, you numbskulls.
Peach is also fully voiced, unlike every other NPC, oddly enough. We also have a voice for Mario for the first time in the main series, provided by one Charles Martinet. This man is 67 years old and he's still voicing about half the Mario cast. Hi, Sorio in editing here. This script was written and recorded back in July, so, yeah. Miss you, Charlie. And of course we have levels inside of paintings, because I don't know why. There are some that aren't in paintings, of course, like one in a miniature house, or through a puddle, or inside a clock. It really makes you think, maybe there's a reason we never went inside Peach's castle before and didn't do so again for over 2 decades.
I'm not one to talk. My back door is a portal to hell and it's not even pretty to look at.
Visually? I don't know, man, it's an N64 game. It doesn't look as advanced as a Series XS5, but it still works well. Like, I don't know if there's anything I can really critique about the visuals, at least for the console they were originally shown on. Now, the modern ports and emulated versions, there's more to critique. I think both versions of this game on Switch kind of look worse than they should, since the draw distance for Mario to go low poly is painfully small. Hell, draw distance in general is a bit of an issue, at least for coins and enemies. It's not always a big issue, of course. I think standard gameplay works fine, but for example, certain cannon shots through coins are a lot harder than they should be since you just can't see most of the coins. But again, this is the N64, a console that could barely run Doom. It's understandable.
So, yeah, the graphics are fine, the sound is solid, the game as a whole is very good. I want to say that the entire thing is aged super well. But then we get to the controls.
Okay. So, judging this may be unfair, as I am approaching this from the perspective of someone who played later games before this one. And on one hand, it isn't fair to judge a game's controls by the standards of its sequels. But on the other hand, my lord, does this feel bad? Mario's controls feel weirdly loose, like he's working with ice physics even when he's not in one of the ice levels. The jump has this weird delay to it, like the game doesn't read the input until Mario's on a specific square. There's a wall jump, but you have to have a run up to the wall and then press the button as soon as you hit the wall. It's not as unforgiving as you might have heard, but it can still be too precise. To dive, you need to get a running start and press B. To long jump, you need to get a running start and press Z, then A. To slide kick, you need to get a running start and press Z, then B. Oh, and if you dive, like I mentioned, you can't jump with the A button, you have to find a way to stop sliding. And the camera just doesn't make sense. Sometimes you can rotate the camera freely around Mario, sometimes you can move the camera to the side briefly but have it snap back into place after a few seconds, and sometimes you can't move it at all without going into a pseudo first-person view. And like, I get there's only one analog stick, but surely you could have used the direction labeled C buttons a little bit better for camera control, instead of flipping to an even worse mode.
It probably sounds like I dislike this game, doesn't it? I'll be honest, when I first started playing this game, I really wasn't liking it. Maybe some of this stuff is just the Switch's N64 emulator being bad, but I also think a lot of it is from the original game. Originally, I figured I'd dislike playing this game, but it's just too damn fun.
I'm gonna be real with you, I think this game has some amazing level design. Bob-omb Battlefield is a wonderful first level that teaches you the basics of combat, exploration, and platforming in this game, while its fortress is surprisingly tricky given its floating position and introduces even more verticality than the mountain in Battlefield. Jolly Roger Bay? Well, it sure is a water level. Coolcomb Mountain is a fairly fun wintertime level with a tricky slide to ride down that has a ton of potential shortcuts. Big Boo's Haunt translates Mario World ghost houses to 3D beautifully, while Hazy Maze Cave is one of the most complex and interconnected levels in the game. Lethal Lava Land is... it's fine. I find it weird that the first two missions are both based on fighting the new bully enemies, but it works. Shifting Sandland feels open in a very interesting way, and flying around with a wing cap through this one is a ton of fun. Dire Docks sure is another water level, but now you have this section where you can pull jump around, so it's alright by me. Snowman's Land is another ice level, this time with the set pieces of a giant snowman to climb and freezing cold water to avoid. Wet Dry World is basically 2 levels in one and actually manages the shifting water levels concept better than any Zelda game, while Tall Mountain sure is a mountain.
Okay, they aren't all perfect.
The final 3 courses are definitely the most unique. Tiny Huge Island is based around a size gimmick similar to Mario 3's World 4-6 with giant or tiny enemies depending on what version you're in. Tick-Tock Clock has you platforming through the inner mechanisms of a grandfather clock, and depending on where the hands on the clock are when you enter, you can manipulate how and even if certain parts of the level move. And finally, Rainbow Ride, where you can fly on a magic carpet up to a flying ship or a big house in the sky or other platforming challenges. And that's not even getting into the bonus stars, some of which have their own mini-levels to get them. It's also fun!
I love this game. I don't think it's perfect. The controls are still funky and some of the stars are kind of just gimmies. Like 3 of the secret stars are just handed to you by toads around the castle. If you talk to every NPC, congrats, you get a head start. Overall, I think I prefer Super Mario World still, though even comparing the two feels impossible. Like, some would argue whether this is even the same kind of game. But still, this game is great. Though I would also like to give an honorable mention to the DS remake, Super Mario 64 DS. The lack of an analog stick does bite, and the lower resolution makes this less than optimal, but overall they added a lot of interesting stuff to that version of the game. Still, this game easily stands out among the early titles as a wonderful Mario game. If only I had an actual N64 to play it on. You know, sometimes you grow up with a game that you really enjoy, a game that sticks with you forever, but when you go back to replay it later in life, it just isn't as good as you remember it being. The joke is Four Swords Adventures.
Picture this. It's 2002 and you're Nintendo.
Yeah, I've had this nightmare before.
Your new console, the GameCube, is off to a somewhat rocky start, but it's still doing pretty well for the moment. It's sold about 6 million units in a year, surely that total number will rocket up over time. Especially now that you're releasing the big new title for this system, a sequel to the smash hit Mario 64, the first game directed by one Yoshiaki Koizumi, the game people have been clamoring for all year, Super Mario Sunshine. And 5 years later, the game hadn't sold as many units as Nintendo's second worst selling console had in a year.
To be fair, 5.5 million was a solid quarter of the GameCube's final sales number. To be even fairer, they both might have sold better if Mario Sunshine was a better game.
So we have a greater story focus in this game. Peach isn't even kidnapped until 10 stars in. Oh, sorry, not stars, shines. Shine Sprite specifically. I don't know, they want it to be different, I guess. The story is a little bit comical, honestly. The court trial has some logic behind it, but only if you assume the villain hasn't been clearly caught on camera, which he clearly is, and none of the actual eyewitnesses were consulted beyond a simple sketch. The voice acting isn't completely terrible, but it's definitely not good. And of course, there's the infamous plot point where Bowser Jr. thinks Princess Peach is his mother, and she doesn't aggressively refute the idea, which, resulted in some interpretations.
Did everyone just forget that babies in this universe are canonically delivered by storks? Like, that's a full plot point in the series. I don't hate the story, to be clear. I think it's good, cheesy fun, and I think it offered some great opportunities for creative visuals.
Hey, funny story, my Wii displays pretty much all GameCube games in widescreen, and for Super Mario Sunshine it works perfectly well, and yet apparently the 3D All-Stars version added widescreen. Sure, okay. Well, regardless, this game looks pretty good. The world of Isle Delfino has its own unique style to it, very tropical inspired of course, but still more than memorable. I will note, however, that despite playing an original copy on my Wii, this was one of the few games I've played so far to have noticeable lag. Part of that may be because, for some reason, they render a version of just about the entire island whenever you're just in a level. Seriously, why does the game need to render Pinna Park and Delfina Airstrip while I'm in Bianco Hills?
Hey, maybe the rocket storage glitch was intentional.
Well, the controls are pretty decent. I wouldn't say they're as tight as some later entries. Mario still has a little bit of momentum when you don't want him to, and there's some baffling exclusions. Seriously, no long jump, and the backflip is basically an Easter egg. But hey, the wall jump is about how you'd want it to be, the ground pound feels powerful, swimming on the surface of the water is very easy, and you know what? I enjoy Flood a lot. The camera is a huge improvement over Mario 64 since you actually have decent control over it most of the time, and the pseudo first-person view is actually really useful when using the squirt nozzle. There are a couple weird features, like the world map on the Z button. It's more of a travel brochure disguised as a map, honestly. The only area where it can actually help you navigate is the hub area of Delfina Plaza. I don't hate its inclusion, but I don't understand why they assigned it the Z button. I know the GameCube controller doesn't have a select button, but surely this could have been a part of the pause menu? I don't know. Overall, I think the game's controls are more than solid. So, all that's left is to actually play the game.
Yeah, I don't love this game. This feels like a complete inversion of Mario 64. That game had really funky controls, but the levels were built around them, and the game as a whole was tons of fun. Sunshine, meanwhile, has great controls and some really fun mechanics, but the levels are just not a lot of fun, and the game feels really poorly thought out. And yeah, I don't think all of 64's levels are great, but one, I think Sunshine has a much lower hit rate, and two, with Mario 64, only the very first mission and the boss fights are actually required to beat the game. Here, there are 50 specific missions that you need to complete to fight the final boss, and the only way to skip any of them is through glitches. You don't have a set number you're working towards, you just complete the first 7 missions in each level, and then you fight the final boss. That's not a terrible way of making a game, but it means that if any of those missions suck, there's no way to avoid them. And let me tell you, some of these missions, holy shit.
The levels in this game are generally interesting ideas, but my god, most of them range from okay to awful. Bianco Hills, the first main level in the game, a decent tutorial in parts, but it reuses so much content, it's difficult to remember most of the individual missions. Rico Harbor is an odd name for what is clearly the port for the island, and even just completing the main story has this blooper surfing twice here, so I hate it. Gelato Beach, a fairly generic beach all things considered, but I'd honestly consider it a great level, if it weren't for the Sandbird. Pinna Park, I feel like this is a great level on paper, but in execution it's just really obnoxious, particularly with the ships and the Ferris wheel maze. Serena Beach has some of the worst missions in the game, I'll give it that. Why do we have a time limit to complete the beach? The goop is mostly on the sand. Noki Bay has 2 super obnoxious points in the eel fight and its secret area, but otherwise, it's okay. I like the wall jumping challenges, and I think the fishbowl physics are kind of fun for whatever that's worth. And finally, Pianta Village. A bunch of trees, mushrooms, and geometric structures on a floating island. How is this a village? The third mission is completely bullshit, but other than that, this is pretty decent. The trucksters are annoying, but you can pretty easily get a 1-up at the start of that area, so it's whatever.
And after you get the 7th shine from each of those levels, you unlock the final area, the painful course of Corona Mountain, and then you're done. There are other missions, of course, 3 or 4 more in each of the levels I mentioned, plus a couple in the opening area, and about 15 in the hub area. There is content outside of the required missions, obviously, but it's all completely optional, and your only reward for 100% completion is a single addition to the ending and a new costume for Mario. I know it probably sounds like I hate this game, and to be fair, it definitely isn't one of my favorites. I think it's a serious step down from Mario 64 in terms of fun factor. But at the same time, I don't think it's absolutely terrible. Like I said, the game controls really well, the style is on point, and I do think some of the missions are actually a lot of fun. There is a good game here, but I think a lot of their more ambitious ideas got in the way of that goodness. So maybe for the next game, I don't know, we could try to go a little bit more classic. I didn't mean to go that far! Have you ever had something you thought you were really good at doing, and then you take a break from doing it for a while, and when you come back to it, you've somehow forgotten everything you've learned about that thing, and now mediocre at best? Yeah. I haven't filmed one of these in weeks, and for y'all, it's been like a couple seconds. This might be weird.
Oh boy, I hope this name never seems stupid. New Super Mario Bros., the 10th original entry in the Super Mario series, the oldest to feature the word new, and the only game where Bowser straight up dies at the end of the first world. This was a big deal, being the first original 2D Mario in over 13 years, and a throwback to the classic entries in the series, most notably Mario 3 and Mario World. And it was received incredibly, still to this day being the second best-selling Mario game ever, only behind Super Mario 1. Seriously, 30,800,000 worldwide. It's the best-selling game for Nintendo's best-selling system. It was critically praised too, getting 9s out of 10s and even some perfect scores. Everyone loved New Super Mario Bros.
Should probably look into that security system soon.
So our story is, Peach's castle is struck by lightning somehow, and then Bowser Jr. kidnaps Peach. Go save her.
I mean, am I really going to complain? My most successful pieces of writing are a top 10 video and a fake Discord chat log.
Yes, most Mario games have simple stories, and this one is obviously no exception. But I feel like other games have at least tried to do something a bit more interesting. Like in Super Mario World, Bowser kidnapped a bunch of Yoshi eggs, and you save one at the end of each castle. In 64, he stole the whole freaking castle, so you're trying to save it and the toads inside just as much as you are Peach. Here, the only noticeable difference from other games' plots is that Bowser Jr. specifically kidnapped Peach, which you could also say for Mario Sunshine, except that was just one aspect of that game's plot, and here it's the entirety.
The only question the game raises is, did Bowser make the lightning happen? Okay, there's also the question of why this is the only time Bowser's flesh has been melted off when he fell in the lava, how exactly his son resurrected him. I'm sure there's a game theory about it that I'm just forgetting, but hey, I don't watch MatPat anymore. I've grown.
Okay, so first big complaint, this game doesn't look great. It's technically 2.5D, so the gameplay is in 2 dimensions and the graphics are in 3. However, most of the actual graphics are still 2D sprites, with only Mario and a few select enemies actually being full models. I wouldn't mind it too much if they were all sprites, but it just doesn't look great mixing the models and sprites together. But even then, that's not really the biggest issue I have. It's more that, the graphic design is pretty uninspired.
And I know what you're going to say, oh, another YouTuber complaining about the new Super Mario games being unoriginal. Don't you know, it's not supposed to be super different from other games. It's supposed to be a throwback to classic and standard 2D Mario. Yeah, a lot of Mario 3's worlds have generic themes, but the game still has its own theater-based style. It feels like the only actual style this game has is, blocks. Rectangles and squares everywhere, because apparently different proportioned quadrilaterals are the latest fad in the Mushroom Kingdom.
The same goes for the level design, honestly. There are some interesting ideas, to be fair. The star coins incentivize exploring the levels, and the new moves Mario has based on his 3D moveset do open new avenues in progression. However, it feels like a lot of the cool ideas in the game are kinda gimped. The wall jump feels funky, like it takes just a half a second too long for the wall jump to be available. The mini mushroom is interesting for exploration, but the fact it overrides any other power-up you have, plus makes you even weaker than Small Mario, leaves the power-up feeling like more of a hindrance than a boon. Similarly, the Mega Mushroom is kind of cathartic, but because it breaks question mark blocks and pipes, it's more obstructive than anything, and the only times it's actually useful are when you're grinding for lives or fighting a tough boss fight. And finally, we have the Blue Shell, which lets Mario turn into a spinning Koopa shell. And like the suits in Mario 3, you can only get it through random luck. You can't even find them as secrets in certain levels like in that game, you have to use one of the random item methods. But hey, even though you can't easily get them, we're still going to build collectibles and level design around them. Wonderful game design, guys, very well done.
God, there's just a lot about this game I do not get! Worlds 4 and 7 can only be unlocked by beating a boss with the mini mushroom, which means 2 of the 8 worlds and multiple different gimmicks and ideas are not only completely skippable, but actively frustrating to unlock. You can't save anywhere you want until you straight up beat the game. Instead, you have to clear a castle or tower for the first time or spend some star coins, so your ability to save is a limited resource. Instead of an actual visible checkpoint, the checkpoint will just spontaneously drop out of Mario as he reaches a certain point, which is more confusing than the system from Mario World. And again, why did they boil Bowser alive?
Let's back up for a second. It's easy for me to just look at a game I didn't enjoy playing and say, oh, I hate this must be a terrible game. But in reality, not only is that just an opinion like all my judgments, but it's also important to remember what's actually important about games like this. Sure, I don't think this is the best game in the series, I think a lot of my criticisms are valid, but that doesn't mean this is a terrible game. A lot of the levels can be fairly generic in design, but they're still well built and intelligently designed. Some of the power-ups are poorly thought out, but they still have their uses, and I think some like the blue shell are genuinely really fun to get good with. The bosses are mostly original to this game, with a mummified Pokey, a monstrous Cheep Cheep, and even the first and only 2D incarnation of Petey Piranha. And while I don't think the game is as replayable as, say, Mario 1, it's full of a lot more content and still more than fun enough to get good at. Plus, I mean, we have the minigames, so can I really complain?
Overall, while it definitely isn't my favorite Mario game, I do think it has its place. And I can totally understand why people loved it back in the day. It's just that, like Mario 3, I don't think this is really my kind of thing. Still, it makes me excited for the future. What? People say this is the best new Super Mario game? Fuck. So I kind of have a funny story. Playing the Wii games for this little project on my childhood Wii. Would have been around 7 years old in 2006 when the Wii was first released, and like many children, I still thought Santa was real. Oh, spoiler warning for real life, Santa isn't real anymore. Also, this channel isn't for kids, fuck shit. So for Christmas, I wrote a letter to Santa, asking him to please bring my brother a Wii as he really wanted one. And years later, my parents admitted that I had accidentally guilt-tripped them extremely well into buying us a Wii. Mom, I hate to break it to you, but I did exactly what I was trying to do. Just to the wrong target.
Weird to think that the Wii was the first Nintendo system, period, to not have a launch title in the Mario franchise. I mean, give the GameCube credit, it at least had a funky Luigi game on day one. Well, a little less than a year later, the next big 3D Mario title, Super Mario Galaxy, released to critical acclaim and commercial success. Sure, it wasn't the best-selling game in the series, and it paled in comparison to new Mario sales, but hey, it still sold more than 64 and almost twice as much as Sunshine. However, its big claim to fame these days is less so its sales numbers, which were decent but not ridiculous, and more from its critical response, Jesus Christ.
This isn't just the best reviewing Super Mario game, or even the best reviewing Mario game in general. It's the second best reviewed Nintendo game, and according to Metacritic, the 6th best reviewed game, period. And it's not just critics either. Loads of Mario fans will, if given the opportunity, sing this game's praises to the high heavens. Even Nintendo itself, the official Nintendo magazine, Nintendo Power, rest in peace, their 20th anniversary issue cited it as the best Wii game. And then, in their very final issue, they listed it as their 3rd favorite Nintendo game ever, only under the ever-legendary Link to the Past and Ocarina of Time. Which in personal experience might mean they actually think it's their absolute favorite, but they don't want to deal with butthurt Zelda fans. Everyone absolutely loves this game. So, why? Why does everyone love this specific game so dang much? Probably because it's a great fucking game.
So the game begins with Bowser kidnapping Peach.
Invest in a goddamn cannon!
This game's story is weird. On the surface level, it seems like your standard Mario plot. Bowser kidnaps Peach to go save her. But this time in space! However, there are actually a lot more factors at play here, specifically thanks to the new princess introduced here, Rosalina. Is she even actually a princess, or do we all just call her one? Rosalina is a girl whose mother died, so she ran away to space with a baby star, and now she's a goddess in charge of space who sees over the continual death and rebirth of all things. And the game ends with Mario and Bowser accidentally destroying the universe, only for the adorable baby Lunas you've been seeing and working with throughout the game to dive in the black hole and begin the universe again.
You know, when you just say the whole plot out loud, it kind of sounds insane.
I actually like the weirder bend to the story here. It gives Rosalina a lot more depth than you would expect, and while the tone can definitely get odd, I think it makes the storyline here stand out a lot more from other entries. I don't think Miyamoto was wrong to dislike the mother's death plot twist, but I still think it works. I don't know, maybe it was just too much of a Zelda plot beat.
So, a princess who's also a goddess, whose backstory involves her mother dying, and also she's blonde and has an ambiguous power level. Maybe it is more of a Zelda plot.
Now, what can I say about this game's presentation? Well, the graphics are very Wii.
You know what I mean, right? It has that we're trying to make up for the lower polygon count than other consoles by giving everything a specific texture, and our lighting is super obvious because that makes it high-tech. I don't think it looks bad, they are good textures, but it doesn't necessarily age as well as, say, Sunshine. I will say, though, the music makes up for it. I mean, sure, the initial invasion of Peach's castle is basically just the Imperial March, but every other song is super iconic. So far, everything is getting an at least decent score, huh? Well, let's talk about the controls. Fuck. I'm gonna be honest, I don't think this game controls very well. Granted, the fact that I'm not saying it's horrible is probably impressive given the whole shifting gravity gimmick, but still. Even though you have to use the nunchuck to play it, it feels like your movement is locked to 8 directions, and it feels like changing directions feels a bit slow, or on occasion doesn't work at all. It's not unplayable by any means, but Mario feels noticeably stiffer here than he does in Sunshine or even 64. I assume it's a result of the whole orbital gravity thing, but I don't know. On flat ground or round planets, it still feels off. There's very bare-bones camera control, which makes sense given the lack of an analog stick on the Wiimote. Just moving it left or right a set amount in some areas, or going into the first-person mode and using the nunchuck stick for that. I can live with it, even if it isn't ideal. There's lots of the pointer control stuff, which is, like, fine. I don't know, I don't absolutely hate the pointer controls, I think it works fine enough, but it's hardly the most fun. And then there are the full motion control based segments. So fun fact, I fucking hate using the Wii's motion controls. Yeah, I think it's the biggest complaint everyone has with Galaxy, the manta ray, and especially the rolling ball segments. And yeah, they're bad. I don't get it, honestly. The pointer controls are fine, I don't mind a little waggle to spin, so why are the tilting sections so bad? Because the original Wiimote could do basic pointing and waggling really well, and actual nuanced tilting, not so much. This game's controls are far from perfect, but I could say the same about Mario 64. That game had rough controls, but the game built around those controls was a ton of fun. So who's to say that's not the case for this game? I wasn't sure what to expect when I sat down on what I figured would be the first day of like a week I would play the game over. I beat it the next day because I genuinely couldn't stop playing it. Holy shit, this game is so goddamn good. This is the first game I've played for this little project where I genuinely had trouble putting it down. The levels are so well made, they're more linear than in 64 or Sunshine, but you still get to explore them, and they all have these creative ideas. The boss fights are some of the most epic in the series. Like, even if the Bowser fights are simplistic, their presentation is on point. We have the first power-ups in a 3D Mario that aren't just FLUDD, and they let you turn into a bee or a boo, or you can get fire and ice flowers that give you projectiles, and for the ice flower, different ice abilities, but only for a limited time, so you better be careful how you use them. If you do the spin while running on ice, you start ice skating, which is faster than usual but harder to control. But if you just stop moving for a second or two, you can go back to normal walking. The game goes back to the set number of stars to unlock levels format from 64, so you don't have to put up with every level to beat the game if you don't want to. If you get all 120 stars, you unlock Luigi as a playable character for the first time in 3D, and he plays a little differently from Mario and acts as a form of hard mode. And if you get all 120 stars as him, you get to fly around the area from the game's intro, and it's so cool and I love this game so much! Seriously, this is the best Mario game I've played so far, hands down. I have less complaints about Mario World, but I also didn't have as much fun with it. Mario Galaxy might not be perfect, but it's still an incredibly fun ride. One I absolutely love. It's the only game so far where, even after beating it, I honestly kind of want to keep playing it. Maybe go for 100% completion. I probably won't do it now. I mean, I have like 8 more games left to play, including its direct sequel. So, I'm not exactly lacking for Mario to play. But I still think this is one of, if not the best Mario games ever. Particularly because of how inventive it was. And they followed it up with a fucking punchline. So, continuing on from the story I told about getting my Wii, I ended up having a lot of games for the Wii. Like, look over my shoulder. See all those Wii games? Yeah, those are all my childhood Wii games. It was a lot of fun, but the big problem was I was never very good at video games. You could argue I'm still not. Like, I grew up with New Super Mario Bros. Wii, and this was well before my completionist phase, and yet I never remember making it past the second world. In fact, based on the save data still on my Wii, nobody in my family ever made it past World 3, and we had pitifully few lives. So I'm probably not qualified to review video games. Which makes me perfect for games journalism.
You know, I'm curious when Nintendo fired their naming expert, because clearly it was sometime around 2009. New Super Mario Bros. Wii, the sequel to New Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Wii. The new title still kind of makes sense, as it is still the first 2D Mario on console since around 96. It released in late 2009, and when an Australian guy bought it a little bit before release and uploaded it online, Nintendo sued him, and he was fined almost $1.5 million Australian dollars.
You know, suddenly I understand the whole "it is always morally correct to pirate Nintendo games" meme.
So the story here is, on Peach's birthday, a cake is delivered to her castle, which secretly contains Bowser Jr. and the Koopalings, making their return for Mario 3 in World. They use the cake to kidnap Peach, and they escape via airship. The only ones who can stop them are Mario, Luigi, and 2 random toads. Not even the classic red-spotted toad like in Mario 2, just a generic blue and yellow toad. And as the 4 of them run off, the castle's toads fire off new power-ups via cannon.
You know, I appreciate the help, guys, but I think it would have been more helpful if you, I don't know, used it as a cannon!
There's really not a lot of story to this game. The only real factor is the return of the Koopalings, who also serve as the game's bosses. All of them. Seriously, this game has a total of 19 boss fights, of which 14 are the Koopalings. You fight all of them twice, once as a mid-boss and again as a world boss. They aren't the exact same fights, of course. The second battle is spiced up by Kamek doing his magic thing, like with Yoshi's Island, but instead of making them bigger, he just sort of changes the terrain. So basically, there are no original boss fights, compared to New Mario, where 6 out of the 8 worlds have actually unique 2D boss fights. Here, it's just the Koopalings, Bowser Jr., and Bowser. There's one boss fight with Kamek, to be fair, which is kind of original, and some of the Bowser Jr. fights are fun, but, there is no originality in the boss fights or the story.
In other breaking news, Smash Bros. Brawl is slow, Mario and Sonic is unsubstantial, and Sonic has had a rough history since his jump to 3D.
Yes, everyone knows that originality is the biggest problem with the new sub-series, and that's especially obvious with the game's presentation. Now, to be fair, the game looks better than the first New Mario. Just about everything is a 3D model, and the graphics are obviously a lot clearer than they were on the DS. The game looks decent, it just lacks any actual identity. The models are just about the same as in Mario Galaxy, with anything not in that game being based on their appearance in New Mario, but without the funky DS graphics or the outer space setting, there's nothing actually unique to this game's visuals. I mean, look at the world themes. Grassland, desert, ice, ocean, jungle. We have a world set on a few rocky mountains that just so happen to include 2 water levels for some reason. The game's sound is taken straight from its predecessor, though to be fair, the soundtrack is remixed. Slightly. Yeah, even when this released, it was basically just another Mario game, and that was before it got its own sequels.
Though to be fair, the other games didn't have as much bumping involved.
Yes, the big selling point of New Mario Wii is multiplayer. The game has co-op with up to 4 different players.
Let's move on.
Well, the game controls well enough. It can be played with the Wiimote on its side, similar to the NES controller, or with a nunchuck, which is kinda sorta completely pointless. Honestly, the Wiimote on its side is just fine. There's nothing bad about the control layout here. You run with a 1 button, jump with a 2 button, move with a D-pad, completely fine. However, New Mario Wii has one specific utility that you use throughout the game, carried straight over from Mario Galaxy, the spin jump. Sort of. In mid-air, it's more of a twirl, but it can activate certain power-ups. This ability is activated by shaking the Wiimote, because Nintendo loves its gimmicks. It's fine, I don't mind it. It just feels like they only did it because there weren't a ton of buttons on the controller. What I do mind are the occasional motion control gimmicks sprinkled throughout random stages. So, across the levels, a few select objects require tilting the Wiimote in order to move them. Why? These aren't all terrible, some of these are kind of engaging, but my lord are none of these necessary. It just feels like they're trying to trick you into thinking the Wiimote's motion controls are actually useful.
And were they ever useful? Or cool? Or good?
At least the power-ups are better this time around. We have the returning Fire Flower, Superstar, and Super Mushroom, of course, plus the Mini Mushroom from New Mario. Yoshi also makes his return with both the eating enemies from Mario World and the Flutter Jump from the Yoshi series. Though he can't be brought between levels anymore, which is kinda lame. It's fine, the levels he's in are clearly the ones built around him, but it's just a buzzkill that we finally get Yoshi back into 2D Mario and you barely get to use him. And finally, for the returning power-ups, we have the Ice Flower, similar to Mario Galaxy, though here it's a lot closer to the traditional Fire Flower. Once you get it, you can shoot freezing ice balls, which is very useful as you can use frozen enemies as platforms, or if they're small enough, pick them up and throw them around. You can even freeze piranha plants and ground pound them, which is fun. However, thanks to those useless cannoneers, we have two brand new power-ups, the Penguin Suit and the Propeller Mushroom. The Penguin Suit is probably one of the rarest items in the game, and it lets you shoot ice balls like the Ice Flower, break bricks on the ground like the Blue Shell, and swim through the water like the Frog Suit. And you can actually access it without relying on complete random chance. And finally, the Propeller Mushroom, which lets you fly by shaking the Wiimote, and that's about it.
I mean, it's better than the Mega Mushroom at least.
Ultimately, the game isn't terrible. I think the level design is better than New Mario, though I do think the difficulty is a bit inconsistent. If you're just trying to beat the game without going for completion, it's more than easy enough. But if you're actually trying to get all the star coins, say hello to the bottomless pits. But hey, there are more original ideas than the DS game, and even if I didn't get to try out the co-op mode, it's still cool that they included it. I remember playing with my brother as a kid, and that was really cool, being able to play a new Mario game together. But ultimately, do a few cool ideas for levels and optional co-op make the game that much better? I don't know.
This isn't a bad game by any means. I think it's more than decent. It's just not terribly exciting. I prefer it to its predecessor, to be sure, but given that was one of my least favorite games thus far, it's not really saying much. I don't hate New Mario Wii, but I'm gonna be perfectly honest. I don't think young me was missing out on much only playing the World 2. There's really not much point to playing this game nowadays. Unless you're into pointless motion controls, then 9 out of 10 must play on the Wii. Let's see, what jokes do I do for this opening? Recycling the same intro from Galaxy 1? No, I'm saving that for a later series. Continuing the whole Wii backstory thing? Nah, those two came out the same day, this one definitely won't. I could just include myself rambling about this very predicament. Nah, too meta.
So, did you like Mario Galaxy?
Are human beings mammals?
Yes, with how incredibly lauded Super Mario Galaxy was, there were obviously plans put in place early on for a follow-up. I mean, they had all of space to work with, they couldn't stop at just 42 levels. Originally, the idea was to add in elements that were scrapped during Galaxy's development, place them into an expanded version of the original, and package it as Super Mario Galaxy More, or Galaxy 1.5. Then I assumed the previously fired title guy broke his head through a window and screamed profanities while the designers realized they wanted to make an actual game. Thus, Galaxy 2 was born.
Dear, I thought I was done with sex ed. Galaxy 2 is obviously very similar to Galaxy 1, funny how that works, and it received a similarly warm reception. 9s, 10s, 5 out of 5s. This game is almost the exact same score on Metacritic as Galaxy 1, placing it above games like Half-Life 2, Resident Evil 4, even Breath of the Wild. Even in 2010 when it was released, it beat games like Mass Effect 2, Red Dead Redemption, and Rock Band 3. Seriously, even Rock Band 3! So the question is, did it deserve all that praise, or did it just leech it off its older brother, like I used to do in school sports? Now, I did grow up with this game, even beat it, surprisingly enough, so you could make the argument that I might be biased by nostalgia. Of course, I also grew up with Mario Sunshine and New Super Mario Bros., as well as Four Swords Adventures, Shadow the Hedgehog, and Suicidal Depression. So I might not have nostalgia goggles.
Oh boy, I wonder what the plot will be about. My bet's on a political assassination. Yes, infamously, Galaxy 2 stripped back the story compared to Galaxy 1. No more lore or universe restarting, just a big Bowser and a kidnapped princess. There are a couple interesting things, to be fair, like overweight Luma. The plot seems to be the direct result of the timeline reset at the end of Galaxy 1, with this being what happens during the new timeline Star Festival. There's also a storybook aesthetic and theme in the few story cutscenes, which cards on the table don't add much at all. I guess the implication is that this is a story that Rosalina is telling the baby Lumas, similar to her storybook from Galaxy 1. But I don't know if that really does anything beyond when she introduces the story and transitions to the ultimate post-game.
To be fair, there have been worse framing devices. Like, does anyone actually care about the letters in Professor Layton? Obviously, the story isn't too important for this game. Whether that's because of Miyamoto's influence, like he implied, or an artifact of the whole 1.5 thing is hard to say. Like, they probably didn't put much thought into a new storyline when they thought this was going to be a basic expansion pack. And yes, in case this game's backstory didn't make it obvious, the game still has a lot of Galaxy 1's DNA in it.
Okay, yeah, this is Mario Galaxy again. Not just in presentation, though yeah, it looks almost identical in places, but also in control. The gameplay is just about the exact same as Galaxy 1, weird turning and all. To be fair, that turning is intended to compensate for the gravity shifting, which is still present in this game, but it still feels weird, at least during the flat gravity sections. In terms of the presentation, the graphics and sounds are basically the same, though to be fair, there are some different level themes that help distinguish it visually, and there are some new arrangements and tunes. I feel like I should give this game a bit of flack for the unoriginality, given I gave Lost Levels hell for its own. In all honesty, I don't care too much about originality in a sequel as long as it's still a good game, and to be fair, there is still a fair amount of creativity in here, like the removal of a full dimension.
Yeah, I've heard about that surgery. Not too interested myself.
What's the point of having so many 2D sections exactly? I know the idea is to be more accessible for people who aren't experienced with 3D, but the first of these 2D sections comes after tons of 3D gameplay. I don't hate the gameplay on principle, it does still play decently enough, but it seems kind of weird. Also, I feel like anytime they turn a corner in the 2D sections, it feels even weirder than usual. There are other additions that are better though. I think Yoshi is really fun, managing to translate the eating from the 2D entries better and working in the power-up ideas behind the other items. Also, he shakes his head when you shake the Wiimote, which is cute. There are 3 other new items to use, 2 power-ups and 1 grabbable. The spin drill is interesting, letting you dig through dirt, even to the other side of the planet. It's an interesting idea, and I think they do everything they could have with this gameplay-wise. The rock mushroom is pretty fun, at least in places. Rolling around is harder to control, but it's super powerful and totally chaotic. Finally, the cloud flower, which lets Mario walk on clouds and create up to 3 platforms below him. This is so good. It's super useful and has a lot of different uses, especially since you can replenish the clouds by picking up another flower. It's really fun and makes up for the missing ice flower decently well. They also cut the red star, but meh, that thing was barely used anyways.
So, yeah, good to better gameplay compared to Galaxy 1, but obviously what matters a bit more is level design, like with most Mario games. And...
Don't get me wrong, I think these levels are great. Honestly, some of these levels are actually more creative and interesting than in Galaxy 1. It's an amazing set of levels, but it's also a very different set of levels. They're very linear, like in Galaxy 1, but there's a lot less exploration compared to even that game. They're also typically shorter than in Galaxy 1. A lot of galaxies only have 1 or 2 planets, and even when there are more, each galaxy has 3 stars max, at least before getting all 120 main stars. We can play as Luigi in a decent number at least. Yeah, Luigi is here and playable, even before the ending. You need to beat the final boss to play as him in every level, but still, get about 20 stars and you can play as him in a decent number of galaxies.
Seriously, just about every website says you need 30 stars to unlock him, but I got him with my 20th star. The internet is just wrong.
There is one new incentive to explore at least, the comet medals. Yeah, I didn't really talk about prankster comets in Galaxy 1, partially because, to be honest, I didn't really play any for this project. I think the way they work in Galaxy 1 is pretty funky, honestly. Once you unlock them, 1 or more will always be in orbit around a galaxy, basically at random, and if it's in orbit, you can't choose a different star in that galaxy. You can sort of move the comets around if you spend a few star bits, but otherwise you just kinda have to work around the comet. Here, the comet can only appear in a galaxy if you collect its comet medal, plus clear a few other requirements. There's still a bit of a headache in trying to figure out how to unlock the comets, but on the other hand, they don't move around at random, they stick to where they're orbiting forever. Plus, you can even pick other stars while it's orbiting a galaxy, because they didn't want to be obnoxious apparently. Who'd have thought?
Overall, I think this is a very great game, even if it got part of the way just by copying Galaxy 1. In some ways, you could argue that it's better than its predecessor, more power-ups, more ideas, more quality of life features. I could definitely see that argument, but personally, I don't know, I like it a lot, but not as much as Galaxy 1. First, I thought it was just the lack of creativity, but looking at it honestly, the game still has a lot of original content made for it. If I had to guess, honestly, it's just that the game lacked some of the surprise factor that Galaxy 1 had. But still, I think this game's great, and I can't wait to see where the series goes from here. Just wish the title guy didn't get arrested. You know, I swear I used to own this game physically. What happened to it? Did I end up wherever my original Wii U went? Who even steals a Wii U?
You ever just have no clue how to introduce something? Super Mario 3D Land, the first original 3D Mario platformer on a handheld and the fifth 3D Super Mario game in general. It's also the first Super Mario game on 3DS, so the title is either a joke about being Mario Land in 3D, or it's a joke about being Mario Land in 3D! And one of those is much more impressive, at least in theory.
Note that in theory part, it will be on the final exam.
So the story is... Bowser kidnapped Peach, go save her. Again. There are postcards in between each world that show small snapshots of Peach and Bowser, including Peach trying to escape from his castle before Mario can even save her. Plus, once you beat the final boss, you learn Luigi has also been kidnapped. And yeah, that's pretty much everything.
Who needs story? It's a Mario platformer, not an RPG. I mean, it was released like a year before Sticker Star on the same system. They didn't give a shit about plot. The story is weak, to be sure. I don't think anyone will really deny that. But hey, at least the game's presentation is more original, right? Right?
Okay, look, this game is a very good-looking game for the 3DS. It runs well, it's insanely polished, there aren't any major visual flaws or quirks, but there also aren't any real unique features. There's a fixed camera now, which was used in the Odyssey games beforehand, just not in every level. A lot of enemies and objects have tails because the developers decided that feeding off Mario 3 nostalgia was a good replacement for an identity. Few actually new enemies are super round.
Okay, there is one creative addition to the graphics. I'm just a bit too astigmatic to properly appreciate it.
Ah, the 3D of the 3DS, one of the most useless of all of Nintendo's useless gimmicks. Okay, it's not terrible, and some of the puzzles in the game use it interestingly, but that's really about it. There are cardboard cutouts that are apparently supposed to trick you if you're playing in 2D mode, and they really don't, at all. I appreciate that they let you choose if the 3D is deeper or just pops out, though frankly I can't see it popping out anyways. But again, my eyes can barely see in 3D in real life, so I'm probably not the best judge of a 3D effect.
By the way, that one's not a joke. I am a hazard on the road.
So as for the gameplay, what the fuck do you want me to say? It's standard New Super Mario Bros., but in 3D and with the backflip and long jump from 64 and Galaxy. Outside of a couple new moves, there is nothing unique about this game. The power-ups? Well, we have the Tanuki suit returning from Mario 3, except the default version can't turn into a statue and no version can actually fly, just hover after a jump. Seriously, we could have very easily had a form of flight like in 3 or World, but in a slightly more open 3D environment, but instead they just didn't do that. We have one actually new power-up to be fair, the Boomerang Flower, which lets Mario throw a boomerang, and meh, it's not terrible. It can be useful since it bounces around and can pick up certain items, but like, I don't know man, it's just not really interesting. It's a fire flower, but instead of bouncing it flies back and forth. That's it. Other than those two, I mean, there's no score counter, and you have a super mushroom whenever you use the life. Other than that, I mean, this is just a new title, but with an extra dimension.
To be fair, there are 2 new items as well in the form of boxes you wear on your head. One is just the propeller block from New Wii, and the other one gives you coins. That's it. There is star coins like in the new games, star medals. You can find clocks if you want to add some more time to the time limit, which I never really ever even got close to needing. Yeah, this game just has nothing. Well, except levels.
The levels in Super Mario 3D Land, well, they aren't terrible. They have a few interesting ideas occasionally. We have new binoculars we can find to observe the rest of each level, and we can even jump on super note blocks to go up to special areas, sort of similar to those bonus areas in the clouds in Mario 1 and 3. Only now you either storm through enemies with a star, or platform around cloud platforms in the 3D recommended isometric view. There are blocks you can hit to move them in the specified direction, which lets you move platforms around in a pretty unique way for the series. There are face block platforms similar to the first new Mario game, only spawned from red exclamation mark boxes so they can go anywhere they want. There are two-way doors and warp pipes you can use both ways. There are also mystery boxes, both in levels and on the world map screen, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure these don't do anything outside of giving you more star medals, coins, and occasionally power-ups. It's not a terrible idea, small challenge areas like in Galaxy 2, but also I'm kind of the opinion those challenge areas are also pretty gratuitous. Overall, I mean, the game isn't entirely devoid of creativity, just, mostly.
Apologies to all the 3D Land fans for how hard I've been on it, all 3 of you. Levels really don't tend to stick to any theme for each world, interestingly, just mixing them together. Though given on the world map, the first 3 worlds are just variants on grasslands with different colors, so it's not really a shock. There are some themed levels, like a couple desert-based stages in World 5 and a forest level in World 4. There are also themed levels that make no sense based on the world's greater theme, like the pyramid in the cloud-based World 6. It's a choice. I'm reminded of the criticism of Kirby's Star Allies, which also didn't really structure the level themes together in any sort of coherent way. That game suffered from its stages lacking any sort of memorability, which is definitely the biggest problem with 3D Land 2. I didn't hate any of these levels, honestly, but none of them really left an impression. Same for the bosses, all 4 of them. With fake Bowser, Boom Boom from Mario 3, his new female counterpart Pom Pom, and then the real Bowser, all of whom you fight at least twice. This game just has no identity of its own, even less so than direct sequels like Galaxy 2. That doesn't mean it's terrible, but it's probably the game I'll remember the least out of the whole series. But hey, even if I don't think it's particularly memorable, still probably better than next week's offerings. The new Mario series. The bane of all hardcore fans of originality. For those who didn't live through the early 2010s, let me tell you, it was not easy being a hardcore Nintendo fan. Imagine a point in time where their most exciting release of a year was a shoddy remake of an N64 game and a combo pack of epic yarn in Yoshi's story. And truly, no year was better foreshadowing of what this generation would be than 2012. At least 2011 had 2 N64 remakes.
New Super Mario Bros. 2, the direct sequel to New Super Mario Bros. If you think that's weird given that new Wii was released in between them, then you're wrong and also maybe stupid apparently. This game was developed to be a key title for the 3DS near the start of its life, with Nintendo pushing it hard before release. The game was released in August of 2012 and was generally received positively, except by all the people that hated it.
Yeah, nowadays New Mario 2 has a pretty bad reputation. I don't think that's really a surprise these days. The general consensus seems to be that, on its own, the game isn't terrible, but given just how many linear, retro-inspired Mario games there were in just a few years, it's just not interesting. So the question is, even putting originality aside, how good or bad is this game, and is it worth playing today? I mean, I'm pretty sure the answer to that last one is no, but it's still probably worth figuring it out.
So our story begins with Peach being kidnapped because it's a Mario game. However, this time is completely different. The Koopalings kidnap her.
Well, that changes everything.
Yeah, the opening cutscene focuses on justifying the main power for the game as opposed to, an actually original plot. It's just, hey, go through the levels we made for you, fight a Koopaling at the end of each world, and then fight a boss fight against Bowser at the end that transitions into a fight against Giant Bowser, because it works so well in New Wii, why not here? Well, at least the mini-bosses aren't also the Koopalings this time, even if they're still not, interesting. Or original.
And in case you couldn't tell, yes, that goes for the entire game too.
So this game has a very unique gimmick, coins, which have appeared in every Mario game since Mario started being included in the title. But hey, to give them credit, they went all in with this gimmick. They shove it in your face as soon as you start the game before you even see a title screen. There's an entire mode dedicated to getting as many coins as you can without dying, and all coins gathered across all save files and modes are counted and added together to be added to the main menu. There are even downloadable level packs that are exclusively available in the Coin Rush mode, which is the first paid DLC Nintendo ever released. It's an interesting first for the company, though the game being the first full retail game available for digital download on a Nintendo system is still a lot more interesting than some super simple levels for the collect a bunch of coin modes. Overall, the gimmick itself isn't terribly interesting. It isn't terrible, and it does tap into the natural number go up good instinct in most players, but it's really the only new addition to the game, with the only new enemies and obstacles just being variations mostly based around giving coins. Plus, since every level has you collecting hundreds upon hundreds of coins, you're going to have over 100 extra lives by the time you finish the second world.
That is, assuming you actually play the second world.
So we have a world map with 8 full worlds. However, thanks to 2 branches, even without shortcuts, you only have to actually play through 6 worlds to beat the final boss. Now, to be fair, that's not too different from New Mario 1, but it's kind of weird given that this game includes the Koopalings as the world bosses. So even though the 7 of them are all possible to fight, you can beat the game without fighting 2 of them.
I mean, it's fine. Who gives a shit about the plot of the game that they came up with?
So looking at this game, well, this is New Mario. New Wii to be specific. The graphics, the world themes, the music is based directly on that game's soundtrack. It's weird, the whole game just looks like New Mario, but slightly higher quality because, 3DS instead of DS. It doesn't really take advantage of the system's advances like the 3D or gyro, it's just slightly better looking. Which is an interesting way to show off the console's power. I mean, we have a grasslands, a desert, a beach, a forest, the whole shebang.
Yeah, in case it wasn't obvious, there is basically nothing original to talk about here. There are a couple interesting things to talk about, I guess. Just not terribly original things. Like the main power-up gimmick for the game, which lets Mario fly. Sound familiar?
To be fair, this time the power-up isn't even trying to be original. It's the Raccoon Leaf, directly from Super Mario Bros. 3, because this was released less than a year after 3D Land, so like that game, a solid 50% of the game's identity is just referencing Mario 3. Though at least here the Raccoon Leaf works like it did originally. It can be fun to fly around the levels, absolutely, but it's still pretty unoriginal. Even ignoring the fact that it's reused from Mario 3, just about every single Mario game since that one has had a flying power-up. Seriously, there are 2 that don't.
But hey, that doesn't mean the rest of the game isn't original. The rest of the game means it isn't.
Yeah, this is New Super Mario Bros. Complete with Mega Mushroom, except a lot harder to get. These levels are kind of interesting, not in terms of gimmicks or originality because there's none, but hey, there are some fun levels to play through and some star coins to collect and a few secret exits you can access. Yeah, remember when I said there wasn't anything original to talk about? I'm going to be honest, this game leaves almost no impact. I don't hate it, it's not as bad as the Lost Levels or Mario Land. It controls well, the levels are smartly designed, and there's even a co-op mode, so you can even play with friends. The problem is, you could say the same for New Mario Wii. Way more people own a Wii than have ever owned a 3DS.
Overall, I just have nothing interesting to say about this game, and frankly, I don't think anybody does. I think it's telling that the only reason anybody remembers this game is because of its release and a bit of DLC. I don't hate it as much as some people do, I don't even dislike it as much as New Mario. I just don't care about this game at all. Probably has something to do with the next one. The New Mario series. The bane of all hardcore fans of originality. For those who didn't live through the early 2010s, let me tell you, it was not easy being a hardcore Nintendo fan. Imagine a point in time where their most exciting release of a year was a shoddy remake of an N64 game and a combo pack of Epic Yarn and Yoshi's Story. And truly, no year was better foreshadowing of what this generation would be than 2012. At least 2011 had 2 N64 remakes.
New Super Mario Bros. U, the direct sequel to New Super Mario Bros. Wii. If you think that's weird given that New 2 was released in between them, then you're wrong and also maybe stupid apparently. This game was developed to be a key title for the Wii U at the start of its life, with Nintendo pushing it hard before release. The game was released in November of 2012 and was generally received positively, except by all the people that hated it.
Yes, nowadays New Mario U has a pretty bad reputation. I don't think that's really a surprise these days. The general consensus seems to be that, on its own, the game isn't terrible, but given just how many linear, retro-inspired Mario games there were in just a few years, it's just not interesting. So, the question is, even putting originality aside, how good or bad is this game? And is it worth playing today? I mean, I'm pretty sure the answer to that last one is no, but it's still probably worth figuring out.
So our story begins with Peach being kidnapped because it's a Mario game. However, this time is completely different. The castle is kidnapped too.
Well, that changes everything.
Yeah, the opening cutscene focuses on justifying the main power-up for the game as opposed to, an actually original plot. It's just, hey, go through the levels we made for you, fight a Koopaling at the end of each world, then fight a boss fight against Bowser at the end that transitions into a fight against Giant Bowser because it worked so well in New Wii, why not here? Well, at least the mini-bosses aren't also the Koopalings this time, even if they're still not, interesting, or mostly original.
And in case you couldn't tell, yes, that goes for the entire game, too.
So we have a world map with 8 full worlds. However, thanks to a branch, even without shortcuts, you only have to actually play through 7 worlds to beat the final boss. Now to be fair, that's not too different from New Mario 1, but it's kinda weird given that this game includes the Koopalings as the world bosses, so even though the 7 of them are all possible to fight, you can beat the game without fighting one of them.
I mean, that's fine. Who gives a shit about the plot of the game that they came up with?
So looking at this game, well, this is New Mario. New Wii to be specific. The graphics, the world themes, the music is based directly on that game's soundtrack. It's weird, the whole game just looks like new Wii, but slightly higher quality because, Wii U instead of Wii. It doesn't really take advantage of the system's advances like the HD or gamepad, it's just slightly better looking. Which is an interesting way to show off the console's power. I mean, we have a grasslands, a desert, a beach, a forest, the whole shebang.
Yeah, in case it wasn't obvious, there's basically nothing original to talk about here. There are a couple of interesting things to talk about, I guess, just not terribly original things. Like the main power-up gimmick for the game, which lets Mario fly. Sound familiar?
Yeah, this is New Super Mario Bros. Wii, complete with propeller mushroom and penguin suit, except a lot harder to get. These levels are kind of interesting, not in terms of gimmicks or originality, because there's none, but hey, there are some fun levels to play through and some star coins to collect and a few secret exits you can access. Yeah, remember when I said there wasn't anything original to talk about? I'm going to be honest, this game leaves almost no impact. I don't hate it, it's not as bad as Lost Levels or Mario Land. It controls well, the levels are smartly designed, and there's even a co-op mode, so you can even play with friends. The problem is you could say the same thing for New Mario Wii, and way more people own a Wii than have ever owned a Wii U.
Overall, I just have nothing interesting to say about this game. And frankly, I don't think anybody does. I think it's telling that the only reason anybody remembers this game is because of its release and a bit of DLC. I don't hate it as much as some people do, I don't even dislike it as much as New Mario. I just don't care about this game at all. Okay, I think that's enough for this bit. God almighty, I need something to eat. Maybe I have something in the pantry. Okay, let's talk about this for real. So if you somehow didn't see my new Mario 2 review, you probably have no clue what's going on with this video so far, but pretty much everything I said before the cut was from that review. I don't necessarily think it's really reflective of my feelings on the game, to be honest, but I kind of wanted to demonstrate what this game would have felt like when it came out. One problem with my reviewing style is it's hard to replicate or understand the circumstances surrounding a game's release. I usually don't even take them into account, but I felt like it was important since, that's kind of the biggest legacy these two have.
New U came out a grand total of 3 months after New 2, and it was a part of the same sub-series, had shockingly similar graphics and design, and a title only differentiated by a single consonant sound, U instead of 2. Not only that, but it was a launch title for the Wii U, one of only 4 made by Nintendo themselves. This game may have been received decently at launch, but any enthusiasm for it quickly faded. And the thing is, I don't entirely think that's this game's fault. There are some genuinely cool ideas in this game, like the baby Yoshis and the Super Acorn. Seriously, the flying squirrel suit is one of the best flying power-ups in the series, and certainly one of the most original. The levels generally aren't that special, but they are some of the best Nintendo has made for the series, with a few of them even standing above the rest either in design or theming. For a new series game, there are a surprising number of new creative fights. Like, all the tower bosses in New 2 were just Reznor from Mario World, but again, here, while most of them are fights with Boom Boom, Kamek will give him new abilities with each new fight, plus there are fights against a souped-up sumo bro, plus a fight against Kamek himself, and 2 very different fights against Bowser Jr. There are new modes to play through, with Challenge Mode genuinely being brilliant. And none of this is even mentioning the standalone DLC of Luigi U or the addition of Toadette in the Switch port.
Oh, maybe it's better if we don't mention playable Toadette. Here's the thing, basic as this game is, I genuinely have a lot of appreciation for it. I've played the deluxe version through multiple times, and I'll probably do so again. I think this game is genuinely fun and engaging. It just released at a god-awful time. New U being a launch title for the Wii U alone was already a bad idea, but releasing it so soon after New 2 was what turned the new series into a laughingstock. Before then, both the new Wii and the first new Mario sold over 30 million each, but 2 and U? They barely sold 20 million combined. And that's not even talking about how poorly the fans received them. Like, seriously, when I was talking about this being a bad time to be a Nintendo fan, imagine hearing that there was gonna be a brand new Mario game at the launch of Nintendo's new console, and it looked barely removed from a damn DS game. New Super Mario Bros. U isn't a terrible game. Frankly, I think it's a good one. But it was a blot on the series for years. Which, ultimately, is how we got to here. As of when I upload this, Super Mario Bros. Wonder has been out for a day. Obviously, when I'm writing, recording, and editing this, I don't actually have it yet. I did most of that in August. Do you think I'm a Nintendo insider? But I can tell you right now, there's a reason so many people got excited for Wonder. And it's not because there's been some drought of Mario games, or at least not just because of that. It's because, for over a decade, this is what 2D Mario has been. Hell, for a number of years, this is what all Mario was. And however good this game may or may not be, it's impossible to get excited about it. Now, with Wonder, whatever else the game might be, even if the rest of the game feels just like the new games, it's still exciting that the game just looks different. Real talk, people getting so excited just because they see a slightly stylized art style is probably not a great sign for how sick people got of this series. Honestly, I enjoy this game. I especially think it's worth shining a spotlight on New Super Luigi U, which is what I would describe as the idea behind Lost levels, but actually well made. 100 seconds to play through harder levels with Luigi's physics. Plus, we get a remix version of the levels from New U, which allows for iteration we hadn't seen from the series before. Overall, I think this is the best game in the new series, but I also kind of hate the other new series games, so that really doesn't feel like I'm saying a lot. I care about this game. But I can absolutely understand if people hate it. Or, more realistically, have absolutely no feelings about it. New Super Mario Bros. U isn't the best game in the whole series. But, for what it is, I think it's pretty fun. I mean, we have a big interconnected world map, which adds very little, but it makes the shortcuts really fun in this game. Would I prefer the Super Mario World style of world map? Sure. Would I prefer Super Mario World in general? Absolutely. But I mean, it's better than Super Mario Land. No, but seriously, real talk, I think this game is more than decent, and if you haven't given it a shot, you might as well. It's readily available for the Nintendo Switch, and the only changes really don't detract that much from the game. There are a few subtractions, but they really don't matter all that much. Like, I don't think anyone is actually going to freak out about the lack of gamepad support, considering, gamepad. Does New U deserve all the hate it gets? No. Does it deserve some of the hate it gets? Maybe. But, ultimately, the game was just overshadowed more than anything else. Even by the 3D entries. Super Mario 3D World. What a mixed bag of a game. Just as a spoiler, I think this is a great game. One of the top 5 in the series, though of course I'm saying that before playing Wonder. I will also say though, I don't think this is the best way to play this game. For one, the Switch part includes an entire separate game, which, even though I'm not going to give it a full review of its own, I can say it's a ton of fun. Also, that version has a ton of quality of life improvements, new moves that don't mess with the game flow, and I think runs a little bit better. Plus, it's not on the Wii U. 3D World was designed to be accessible and intuitive, as well as creative and fun. It's sort of a follow-up for the new Mario series, as well as obviously being a sequel to 3D Land. According to Yoshiaki Koizumi, the developers went all out inserting elements to let players further enjoy the sprawling environments. Yes, I'm so bad at talking about development history, I'm quoting developers directly. I'm a genius. I'm gonna be honest, the title doesn't make a ton of sense here. Sure, the 3D Land title was fairly generic, but it kind of fit. It's like Mario Land in terms of being portable, but it's 3D in both gameplay and visuals because of the 3DS. 3D World, meanwhile, is a 3D platformer, like Mario 64, Sunshine, and both Galaxy games. Apparently there were plans for the game to still have 3D visuals, but they were scrapped so they wouldn't have to worry about 3D glasses. Ultimately, it's not a huge deal. The title just means it's a sequel to 3D Land. Don't think about it too much. Don't worry, I never think much at all. So, this is the first HD Mario game that isn't, New U, and it looks great when you're not looking at the gamepad. Yeah, the Wii U does great graphics in general, but the gamepad screen is 480p, darker than the TV output, and just generally kinda not a great screen. Still, on a TV screen or a Switch, this game looks amazing, if not terribly unique. It's a very clean Mario art style, basically the epitome of the presentation Nintendo went for during the Wii U era. I know a lot of people really hate this style, and I can understand why, but I still like it a lot. I think it looks great, even if it is a bit smooth.
And even if you don't like the graphics, you have to admit, this soundtrack is the bomb. Seriously, it's so jazzy while still keeping the variety of the Galaxy games. It's the kind of soundtrack that rocks so hard you just have to dance to it.
Assuming you can dance. I can't.
So the story here is fairly different from usual, but I think I can still summarize everything in just one sentence. Bowser kidnapped 7 fairy princesses from a different kingdom, and now Mario, Luigi, Peach, and Blue Toad need to save them. To be fair, there's a fake out after the 7th world that I missed, but really the fact that there are 8 main worlds instead of 7 isn't some big twist these days.
And just for the sake of the timeline, I'm writing that a few days after the Mario Wonder Direct, but over a month before the game launches. $50 says there's secretly an 8th world in that game too.
Well, once we hop into our first level, we get to see what the gameplay is like, and shocker! It's 3D Land again. But the score is back! Like with the console new Mario games, the game offers co-op with up to 4 players, and they do actually use the score somewhat creatively in that mode. Or so I'm told. Yeah, just like with all co-ops games, I'm playing this one solo. No pals around to help me beat the levels, and while this ethically sourced gameplay may make you think otherwise, I almost entirely played as Mario. However, I will give them credit. Unlike New Wii and New You, you can at least play as characters other than Mario in single player here. And they all have slightly different physics. Mario is the standard and balanced character, Luigi jumps higher and can sort of flutter, but he's slippery and takes longer to get up to a sprint, Toad runs the fastest but has a lower jump and falls quickly, and Peach can float in the air for a while and falls slower but is the slowest runner. There's also an unlockable character in the form of Rosalina, who can use a spin attack which acts as a double jump or an attack, but is tied with Peach in speed and can't spin when she has one of the more active power-ups. It's all pretty interesting, and it's worth giving each of the characters a chance to find your favorite, even if you're a basic bitch like me.
I'm not a very interesting person. Why do I have a YouTube channel?
This game has a ton of power-ups, more than I think any other game in the series. We have all the ones from 3D Land, including the Fire Flower, Boomerang Flower, and Super Leaf, which is still nerfed. We even have the Invincibility Leaf back if you die a certain number of times. We also have the returning Coin Box and Propeller Box, which behave the same way as in 3D Land, and of course the Super Mushroom and Superstar. They also include the Mega Mushroom in certain levels, which lets you grow super big and storm around, which does have more uses than in New Mario and New 2. You can break certain blocks, and they use it in very specific levels that are built around the ability. And of course there are the 2 brand new power-ups, the Super Bell and the Double Cherry. The Super Bell is cool, letting you attack enemies on the ground, dive through the air, climb up walls, and even kind of float in the air for a couple seconds. It's surprisingly versatile, and I think it's one of the best power-ups in the series. As for the Double Cherry, man is this tricky to use. It spawns an identical copy of the player character, power-ups and all, and you control both of them at the same time. However, the clones are super fragile, vanishing after only one hit. Technically, both versions of the character have this property, and whichever doesn't get hit by an enemy, that's the main one now, and the other dies.
Oh sweet! I've been waiting for the existential horror!
Seriously though, it is pretty fun to try and keep as many clones alive as possible, since you can stack double cherries in order to get up to 5 copies of your character, and if you bring them to the flagpole, you get points for disintegrating them in midair. Fun? It's not just the power-ups though. There are new boxes that you can wear on your head, like the cannon box, which shoots cannonballs, or the light box, which can kill boos. There's a Goomba mask, which helps you blend in with some of the enemies. There's a piranha plant you can carry around in a pot that will eat any enemies it gets close to. You can use an ice skate to skate on ice because, duh. If you crouch while holding a green shell, you enter it and can bounce around for a few seconds. The boomerang flower is used a lot more than in 3D Land, so you have a reason to keep it on you. There are collectible green stars in every level, but also a stamp in most of them. There are a ton of new enemies to work around, which actually behave differently from other enemies in this series. The mystery box levels from 3D Land are much more fleshed out and are actually interesting to collect green stars in. There are actual brand new bosses that each have different attacks and weaknesses. There are bonus levels where you play as Captain Toad, and these are so good they got their own game, and the whole game is so damn great!
Holy hell, I love this game. I think 3D World is an amazing game. One of the best 3D platformers ever. I don't know if I'd say it's better than, say, 64, especially Galaxy. I enjoyed it a lot, but it's still definitely up there. Obviously, I understand why some people are a bit colder on this game. As great as it isn't what everyone was looking for in the next big 3D Mario game. It's not a sandbox platformer, it's not as imaginative or themed as the Galaxy games, and it's barely even a 3D game. Believe me, I understand why some people were down on this game. I really do. But at the end of the day, I think this is still one of the most well-designed, engaging, and just plain fun games in an already well-designed, engaging, and fun series. I would love to play through this game again. Maybe beat every level as every character. I mean, I already collected every green star and stamp, like, might as well. Again though, I think the Switch version is the best version of this game, especially with Bowser's Fury included. But unfortunately, for a lot of people, this wasn't the Mario game they really wanted. That came in 2017. And at last, the finish line is in sight. We're back on the Nintendo Switch. This is one of the only systems I ever bought at launch, barely a few days after its release. I may have been 17 when it released and believed I was above it all as an angsty teenager, but I was still there for the Nintendo Switch. And while most of my Switch purchases over the years have been digital, if only for ease of use, I've still picked up a few games physically.
Super Mario Odyssey was released on October 27, 2017, worldwide, being the first mainline Mario game for the Nintendo Switch. The game was designed to appeal more to core Mario fans by taking design cues from Mario 64 and Sunshine. It would be a sandbox platformer, including optional motion controls, and have tons of ideas for the gameplay design. There were some ideas left on the cutting room floor, such as a role for Rosalina, a woolly mammoth capture, and even Bowser having his own possession cap, but ultimately the game was whittled down and polished into what we have today. And what do we have today?
Well, a recession for one.
The plot of the game is pretty simple ultimately, but there's some flair to it. Bowser is trying to marry Peach and is traveling across the world to collect various items to use in the wedding. A giant ring, a wedding dress, a bouquet, a cake, champagne, electricity, I guess. Also, the introduction cutscene has Mario confronting Bowser directly, only for the Koopa King to beat him up and send him flying miles away into an entirely different country. I'd question how he could survive this, but let's be honest, this isn't the first time this sort of thing has happened to him, not even within the Super Mario series. Plus, every single world is technically a different kingdom, which has many implications. If these are all kingdoms, does this mean each of them have royalty? Does the Metro Kingdom have a monarch, or is it just a strangely named democracy? Is Knuckletech an ancient king of Tostarena, or is he related to the royal family? Moritz Glancieux is stated to be the Dauphin of Bublaine. Does that mean he's actually the crown prince of the Seaside Kingdom, or just Bublaine? The Lost Kingdom doesn't seem to have any sentient inhabitants until the Odyssey and Toad Brigade arrive. Is this now going to be a puppet state of the Mushroom Kingdom? Is the ruined dragon in Crumbledon actually the ruler of Crumbledon? Is he a god, or is he just a dragon with lightning powers? Maybe I shouldn't be overthinking a kid's game this much.
Give me some leeway there, I'm a Kirby fan.
So we have great presentation once again. The game looks absolutely amazing, not just in terms of its graphics quality, but just its style. We have tons of different themes for kingdoms here. The first area looks like a Tim Burton designed world, or if Halloween Town was inhabited by magical ghost hats. The Cascade Kingdom looks like a realistic Cretaceous wonderland. The Seaside Kingdom brings back memories of Sunshine's theming, and New Donk City is New York City, but with Mario imagery everywhere. And the music. Oh, the music! I'm going to be honest, this is one of my favorite soundtracks in the series, and Break Free is maybe the best video game rock song ever. Yes, I like it more than any of the Sonic songs. Fight me. This game is absolutely amazing.
Seriously, I love everything about this. This game is so damn good, both to look at and hear and to play. Like, before this, my favorite game in the series was Galaxy 1, and as much as I enjoyed it, the game's controls weren't exactly great. They worked fine enough for Galaxy, but they still felt weird and unideal. But Mario Odyssey? This game has the best controls in the entire series, and I am not joking.
Mario controls smoother than butter, obviously. He can turn on a dime, he has full 360 degrees of movement, and his jumps go exactly as high as you would expect. He also has all the moves he's gained over the years: triple jump, somersaults, long jump, wall jump, ground and pound, and even the roll introduced in 3D Land. We also have a twist on a returning move in the form of the dive, which lets him dive forward through the air after a jump. I cannot explain just how integral this is to Mario's controls, especially because of the brand new addition to Mario's toolset, Cappy. When you press the X or Y button, Mario tosses out his hat, which can act as an attack for some enemies and acts as a small platform which Mario can bounce off of in the air. If you throw him in mid-air, you can quickly change which direction you're facing mid-jump, letting you dive around, even being able to do a U-turn in the air. And of course, if you throw Cappy at one of 52 objects, you can possess said object. This changes your controls, and for the enemies you can capture, they play exactly like you would want them to. Plus, the Goombas can walk on ice without ice physics, and can stack into towers, so there's actually a reason to play as them.
Not that all the captures are amazing. I mean, who throws a celebration over controlling the boulder?
I seriously cannot overstate how fun this game is to play, though. Just about any jump or move you think you can make, you can, and then some. The game incentivizes exploration, hiding coins, moons, and various other items at every nook and cranny. There are short, more linear challenge sections you can platform through, almost all of which have 2 moons to find within. The boss fights are such a joy, with the main bosses usually being based around one of the main captures in the kingdom, the recurring brutal fights being simple but creative mini-bosses based around their unique hats, and the Bowser fights are so different from any other game's Bowser fight. I mean, you get to beat him up with his own hat's fists. The kingdoms each have their own distinct identity, and while some are definitely weaker than others, they all have something special, a boss fight, a set piece, an aesthetic or theme, and the best of the best are absolutely incredible. The game is big and shockingly interconnected. Once you reach the post-game, there are almost 1,000 different moons to collect across 17 different kingdoms. You can buy dozens of outfits, including hats and shirts, plus dozens of souvenirs to decorate the Odyssey, and it's all so damn good.
Have I made it clear how much I love this game yet? Now, I should acknowledge I'm not exactly coming at this game unbiased. I've played through this game several times, and I'm probably going to play it even more. Weird to think I could be nostalgic for a game that came out in 2017, but hey, that is the year I turned 18, so it makes sense. But ultimately, I think the game really is that good. It's an amazing platformer, unlike any we've seen before. I love this game so much, and I think it's the best in the series. Galaxy is close, and depending on the day, I might prefer it, but I think Odyssey is just that much better. But now, I only have one more question for you all. What the fuck am I supposed to do now? Yeah, I know y'all are watching this after Wonder launch, but for me it's freaking September 2023. Do you know what games are launching this month? Fucking Starfield, Super Bomberman R2, and goddamn Gloomhaven. For the next month and a half, all I have to do is edit these fucking videos. I hate editing! Why did I decide to do this? Why do I make these stupid fucking... Fuck it. I'm gonna go play Tears of the Kingdom again. Alright. Let's finish this. Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and comrades against the binary. I am Sorio99, and it has been one hell of a ride. Almost exactly 6 years ago, the most recent original Mario game, Super Mario Odyssey, released to critical acclaim. And for half a decade, that's been it. We've had some remakes, ports, and side games, but no full new main series games. And for the 2D entries, it's been over a decade since New You was plopped into everyone's laps, and that was New You. So it was about time we got a new one. I didn't buy a physical copy because I wanted to pre-order, and I remember the headache that was pre-ordering Tears of the Kingdom. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, that's its full name, was released on October 20th, 2023, just 4 months after its announcement, though that doesn't mean there wasn't hype. Far from it, people were excited out of their minds for this game, partially just because it wasn't a new Mario game, and partially because it looked very solid on its own. I mean, this was a very interesting looking game right from the word go. Plus, being the first Mario game to release after the Mario movie may have helped promote it. Though granted, I didn't see the Mario movie, so it may be a terrible tie-in. The game began development back in 2019, after New Mario U's Deluxe port came to Switch. The game was apparently built with a philosophy of freedom of choice, not just for players, but for developers. The team was supposedly full of devs who had never worked on a Mario game before, alongside the old guard like the director for the Galaxy games, Koichi Hayashida. They didn't have a deadline to produce a prototype of the game either, giving it much more time to crystallize into a smoother project. A focus on secrets and discovery apparently came into view during the early planning stages, with the hopes to avoid issues that a lot of recent games have had. The idea of just clearing a level and forgetting about it was apparently not too pleasant for the devs, so instead they looked for ways to make the levels change, to incentivize replays, or to just make them more memorable. Wait, they didn't want me to just forget level 1-6 in New Mario Wii? It's clear a lot of time and effort went into making this game feel different from previous games, though unfortunately they had a bit of help with that. A couple months after Wonder was announced, it was revealed that Charles Martinet would be stepping down as the voice actor of Mario & Luigi, starting with this game. It's a real shame, I won't lie, but hey, I'm glad he's had such a good run. In his place, Kevin Afghani is now the voice of Mario & Luigi, and he's doing a great job. Although the way he says wonderful as Mario really sounds weird, and I don't know why. This game's story is actually kind of interesting. Mario, Peach, and their entourage are all visiting the nearby Flower Kingdom for some kind of festival. Suddenly, Bowser, because of course he's here. He grabs a Wonder Flower and suddenly he merges with the castle of the kingdom. So, yeah, our goal this time is Castle Bowser instead of Bowser's Castle. Thanks, Bandy. None of that is what makes the story interesting for me, though. Neither is the fact that this is one of the only Mario games where the plot doesn't involve a single kidnapping. No, what's most interesting to me is that there's actually more story here. Yeah, unlike a lot of other Super Mario games, there are actually multiple plot points across the game. Almost every world has its own subplot with text boxes everywhere and even a few different recurring characters. Hell, they even have worlds that don't end in boss fights if it fits with the plotline. World 3 and World 5 in particular are surprisingly engaging, at least for a 2D platformer. I won't spoil World 5, but World 3 Shining Falls is really interesting. We have a plotline with player characters proving themselves in a series of trials which are represented by some really tricky levels. There's even a reappearing character called the Master Poplin who judges your progress, and when the world is completed, he just hands over the world's royal seed, no boss fight needed. It's a surprising take on structure for a Super Mario game. Oh, yeah, you need to collect royal seeds to beat the game. Should have mentioned that. This game obviously isn't going to win awards for its story, especially compared to some of the RPGs. Though I will say, it does more with the same basic setup than Sticker Star did, at least. But of course, the writing isn't what everyone's going to be talking about, is it? Wow, this game looks good. The big topic of discussion for this game has always been the visuals. Stylized far more than any of the new Mario games, Wonder looks almost like a combo of claymation and hand-drawn animation. Obviously it isn't really either, it's 3D models mixed with intricate sprite work, but my lord, that doesn't change how much this looks like a beautiful cartoon. The character models and animation are obviously the highlights here. Everything feels so perfectly made to just ooze personality. Characters and enemies have been redesigned ever so slightly, so they're still recognizable while still looking unique from any other appearance. There are little animations everywhere, from going through pipes to getting new power-ups to even just running really quickly. It applies to the enemies too. The enemies all react to successfully hitting Mario and co. The Goombas both sleep and react to active threats, and there are even levels that have the enemies animate in their own quirky ways. Hell, in levels that are all in silhouette, every enemy is still visible and distinct from each other. And even outside of the stylization, this game just looks gorgeous. Seriously, Nintendo has figured out how to get the most out of their tech at this point. Again, Shining Falls looks absolutely tranquil. And the Wonder effects, oh, we'll get to those later, but they look absolutely incredible. I love it all. But I mean, I also like eating cake. That's hardly a shock. How about the soundtrack, huh? Yo, if you had told me before release that this would double as a Super Mario rhythm game, I would have asked why you were trying to kill me with hype. This game's music is absolutely incredible. It goes from tranquil to exciting to funky as hell. Even the overworld themes, my lord, I could listen to some of these world themes for hours and still be happy. Hell, there are even tracks from previous games. Let me tell you, I was not expecting to hear Slider from Mario 64 or the goddamn Isle Delfino theme all in a 2D Mario. And don't worry, the game gives you plenty of reason to pay attention to the music. Not only are there music-themed minigames based around the music note blocks, but there are also levels based on following the rhythm, and wonder effects based around musical numbers. The second level in the game has enemies and pipes moving around based on a song the piranha plants are singing, and that's just the start. There's even a badge later in the game that gives you coins for jumping along to the beat of the music. Hell, I won't show it here, but even the final boss is based around keeping to the rhythm of a truly rocking remix of Bowser's theme. Look, I'm not the world's biggest expert on video game music or even rhythm games, but I am an absolute nerd about music, and good lord, I love this game's soundtrack. Now I just need to find a way to download it to my phone. However, so far, we've just been talking about surface level stuff. The game's story, the presentation, the development history, things like that. And while all of that is important, and I'm so glad it's as good as it is, at the end of the day, it's not what matters most here. What matters most in a Mario game, especially a Super Mario game, is how much fun the game is to play. So, how fun is this game? Well, I decided to 100% complete it in about 3 days, so that should tell you something. Let's start with the basics. This level design is great. It feels like the other games in the series, at least the 2D ones, all had at least a few levels that I really didn't care for. Here, man, I struggle to think of a single level I wouldn't want to be in the game. Each of the main levels is built so well, allowing for players to explore and find collectibles or secrets, and you're encouraged to, as the collectible 10 coins go directly into unlocking new items or grabbing more 1-ups. There are also a decent number of hidden exits, though unlike other games, the hidden exits aren't always used to gate off other pathways. Instead, they're mainly used to encourage replays and to buff up your Wonder Seed count. Yes, the main collectibles for the game are the Wonder Seeds, with the player earning one for grabbing each flagpole and for successfully finishing a Wonder Flower segment. Again, I promise we'll get to it. You need enough seeds in each world to open up certain levels, usually including the final palace level, where a boss fight waits against Bowser Jr. Yeah, if I have one complaint with this game, it's definitely the boss fights. There are 5 in total, not counting the semi-boss sequences at the end of the airship levels. And of those 5, 4 are against Bowser Jr. The only one that isn't is the final boss. I don't want to hold it against the game too much. I mean, every Mario game has reused bosses. Bowser in 1, Birdo in 2. We have Reznor as every mini-boss in 2 different games. And to be fair, the Wonder Effect Jr. uses can actually spice up the fight a little bit. Overall, though, I feel like it would have been more interesting to have at least one more boss against someone else. Like, Kamek shows up in the story, he has a presence in the game, I'd love to see what he could do with the Wonder Flower. But, again, I can't hold it against the game that much. At least it's only 4 reuses, that's better than some of these games. Well, in addition to the standard and boss levels, there are also smaller bonus levels that can be tackled along the way. 5 types in particular. Break time levels are just short and sweet experiences, typically confined to one screen that have you just working to grab a Wonder Seed. Badge challenges have you using a specific badge to clear an obstacle course, and we'll discuss those soon too, I promise. There is just so much to talk about with this game. Wiggler races are just that, races against a roller skating Wiggler, which can be fun to get a high score on. KO arenas have you fighting a gauntlet of enemies, either 3 or 4 screens full, within a certain time if you want the 10 coins. And finally, the search party levels have you searching for hidden tokens to unlock the Wonder Seed. They're built around incentivizing playing in multiplayer, and now's as good a time as any to mention that I once again am playing this entire thing in single player. I don't hate the search parties still, I think it can be fun to scour the whole level, but the invisible and character blocks just make them a little bit more annoying than they have to be. Not to mention the character blocks just being an odd idea in general. The game has a total of 12 playable characters. Mario, Luigi, Peach, Daisy, Blue Toad, Yellow Toad, Toadette, Yoshi, Red Yoshi, Yellow Yoshi, Light Blue Yoshi, and Nabbit. Those first 7 all play exactly the same. No physics changes, no different power-ups, they're basically just visual differences. Nabbit plays like he does in New U, he can't get hurt by enemies or obstacles, and he converts all power-ups into coins. The Yoshis are interesting, as they also can't get damaged by enemies, and they have all the abilities Yoshi's picked up over the years, minus the eggs. They can flutter jump, swallow enemies, they're even rideable if you have anyone actually playing with you. Unlike me. However, since Nabbit and the Yoshis are kind of considered easier than the others, I mostly stick to the main 7. And for them, the only differences are that certain blocks are only visible for certain characters. It's not even like only they can hit those blocks, any character can activate them, they're just invisible for them. Still, it's nice to have some character differences since most of the different abilities are now part of the badges. The badge system then. See, that little green Wiggler ruling over the Flower Kingdom tags along with the player, and he can be equipped with one of 24 badges. There are 3 types of badges. The action badges, which add new abilities, moves, or physics changes to the player. The boost badges, which grant buffs to the player that can help to either collect certain things or just stay alive longer. And the expert badges, which change how the player can interact with the game. For the main game, there are 3 of these expert badges. Jet Run makes you always run, Spring Feet makes you constantly jump, and Invisibility, take a wild guess. Personally, I think the coolest badges are the action badges. You can jump higher or move faster than usual, you can give yourself the crouching high jump from the 3D games, or the mid-air spin jump from the Galaxy games. You can even give yourself a swift kick to swim through the water, or a frickin' grappling vine that hooks onto walls and blocks. My go-to later on was definitely the boosting spin jump badge, but honestly all of them are really cool additions to the loadout. Plus, I don't want to spoil too much, but let's just say it's in your best interest to get good with all of the badges before the post-game. Okay, that's one thing I've been putting off down. What's next? Oh yeah, the Wonder Flower is maybe one of the best ideas for spicing up this game. Obviously, I think everyone saw the initial trailer and direct for Wonder and picked up on this game being the trippy Mario game. You know, because every other entry in the series was so lucid and sensible. Look, I'm not judging anyone for making the acid trip jokes, but y'all have got to know that's one of the most tired gags in the series, right? Or just in general, what drugs were they on is basically synecdoche for bad media engagement these days. What stands out to me about the Wonder effects is just how much they spice up the levels without overshadowing everything else. The effects are very varied, while still revisiting and expanding on past ideas. I know some people were probably disappointed that a lot of the wonder effects were repeated, but personally I think seeing the effects iterated on and expanded is really cool, and it makes them feel like a core part of the game's design. It builds on what you've already learned while dealing with these effects initially, then tests it in new and interesting ways. And not every effect is repeated either. There are a decent few levels where grabbing the Wonder Flower gives an entirely unique scenario to run through, and the effects themselves vary wildly. Sometimes the player will be transformed into an enemy or obstacle from the level, sometimes the level will shift and change the physics you're playing with, and sometimes you have a straight up musical number to pop along to. Again, did I mention how much I love this game's music? However, something I actually wasn't expecting was that most of the Wonder Flowers are actually skippable. I think that's actually an interesting idea for this kind of mechanic. It means most of the levels have two entirely different forms to play through, which is tons of fun. Again, replay value is a clear priority for the developers here. There's so much to talk about with this game, as if that wasn't obvious from how long I've been talking. I haven't even mentioned the power-ups. Furry Bait, Drill Kirby, and Bubble Kirby. This is becoming a theme, huh? I mean, even the Wonder Flower, I've been thinking about Kirby gimmicks from the more recent games, though admittedly my brain is poisoned. I enjoy that there isn't a time limit like usual, since it makes it a lot easier to actually explore these levels without worrying about running out of time. I also find it interesting that there's no score counter, but there is a combo system still. Not a pro or con really, but I do find it interesting. Again, there's so much to talk about with this game that I obviously can't touch on everything. However, one thing I do want to point out is how glad I am that I played every other Super Mario before this. Because it feels like there are ideas from across the franchise all in this one game. The last 3 numbered worlds can be tackled out of order, but the final boss level can only be unlocked with all 6 of the main world rewards, just like Mario Land 2. The Shadow clones from Galaxy 2 appear as one of the wonder effects, while the breakdown levels feel like the mystery boxes from 3D Land and 3D World. Of course, the free roam areas of the overworld feel like they're straight out of 3D World, and the purple coins from Odyssey appear as flower coins. There are so many references to 64, from music to effects to racing against a former enemy species. Spraying water out of the elephant's trunk feels like it was pulled from Sunshine, while the playable characters from New U all make their return. There are even items from Mario Maker, like how the on-off switch works. And there's a metric ton taken from Mario World. The spinning face blocks return, you can throw enemies straight upwards, the snail enemies behave the same as Koopas from World, the special world can be accessed long before the post-game if you take a few secret paths, and look, World was already my favorite 2D game in the series, so I'm absolutely not going to bitch about this many throwbacks to it. But the thing is, this still feels like its own game, rather than just one big nostalgia grab. There are dozens of new enemies made for this game, old level themes get spiced up in unique ways, and I'm sorry, have you seen this damn game? I love this game. I love it so much. Wonder is an absolute goddamn masterpiece, one of the best in the whole series. I don't think it's perfect, again, no video game ever is. The boss fights are repetitive, there are some missed opportunities, and the absolute final bonus level is literally the only thing I couldn't finish within 3 days. Whether that's criticism of how hard that level is, or of how relatively short or easy the rest of the game is, I'll let you decide. Overall though, I absolutely adore this game. I mean, what else can I say? It's a goddamn wonder. This was fun. Kinda wanted to do this again sometime. Maybe after I get an editor or teleprompter so I don't have to constantly look over to the script. Oh, maybe I can get another console so that way I'm not confined to just Nintendo.